What's good, Ivy Nation? Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince, that's Brian, and we got to hang out together today, Brian, and it was a lot of
The
fun.
OG's kicking it.
Kicking it on a Thursday during school. So I could not be more happy for a multitude of reasons. And the number one is that we got to hang together.
That's right.
And we also got to speak with Marcus Freeman today. And that was a lot of fun. And a lot of topics were touched on, no doubt about that, in the amount of time that we were allowed to be there. And of course, we went right up to the wire of how long we were allowed to be there, and they had to kick us out in a good way. But a lot of topics that we touched on. So we're going to go over. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to go over and we're going to highlight some of the topics that we thought were the most interesting and kind of break those down just a little bit. And then we're going to roll into a mailbag, and that's the show. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to kind of breaking this down, Brian.
Yeah, man, I am too. We'll do a mailbag at the end of the show, as Vince said. So go ahead and get those mailbag questions in there. We already got 12 of them set up. So we figured instead of, because of what we're going to discuss, if instead of having like a second topic, a second segment, and then we get a little small mailbag, we just figured we'd throw the mailbag in there because obviously, it's fun to engage, and Vince and I don't get to do a lot of mailbags together. And so we didn't want to do that. But then also, if you guys have some follow-up questions to the things that we discussed, we wanted to have sort of this to go right into the mailbag. So if you guys had some follow-up questions to kind of, hey, what was your thoughts on this? Or you said this, or, like, what do you think you meant by that? Or, what does this mean? Or anything like that. If there's there may not be. Hopefully we do such a phenomenal job explaining it all. You have no questions.
Duh.
But in case we don't.
Right.
We want you guys to be able to ask those questions. And so I'm gonna have some fun. Gonna have some fun today. So the OGs together doing a mailbag, man. I was kind of thinking about this, Vince. I sent you a really sappy text the other night about how much I appreciate all you've done, and it was kind of a sad weekend for me, going back to Lima, and I went to my grandmother's gravestone and just spent some time thinking and praying where her and my grandpa are buried, and just start thinking about all the things you're blessed with in life. And I know one of the things that I've been blessed with over the last 5 years has just not only been your friendship, Vince, but just everything you've done for Irish Breakdown and continue to do behind the scenes that people don't know about. So always appreciate that. So when we get a chance to sit down and talk football, man, it's always a blast. And just think about where this channel's come. You sent me a text like about a year ago of when we first started doing it. Vince took a picture of, first of all, the lame IB logo we had back then, but then also it's 116 subscribers.
Yes.
That was in 2020.
Yeah.
Right. Had 116 subscribers. Here we are, almost to 19,000. Getting to talk Notre Dame football every day, man. It's a great thing. And so
it is.
It was fun to be in the press conference, or being up there today. The building is coming along, Vince. Yeah. That's one thing. We parked down to where we had to walk in front of the new football facility. They're starting to put the bricks on the outside. Mm-hmm. It's going to look just like the Goog. I mean, the current indoor stadium. It's like the same color scheme, brick wise for that. That sucker's going to be a really awesome building, man. I can't wait for that. But
massive.
They were doing a ton of work there, so that was awesome.
Yeah,
that was awesome to see.
Because if anybody's, obviously people that have been on campus and things, like the footprint of this building, it goes basically from where the Goog is right now, almost all the way, to the road, all the way to the indoor tennis facility. Like, it is one heck of a footprint. So I told Brian, I said, I don't care what happens. If there is a tour opportunity for the media when that thing opens, I'm going to be there because I need to see the inside of this place. I can only imagine what it's going to be on the inside with all this planning and all this money that has gone into it. And the fact that it's taken 2 years to put together. I mean, or, physically to build. So it's going to be something else. So really looking forward to when that thing is done. I'm sure Notre Dame, the program, is way more looking forward to it than I am. Yeah. But they got some pretty decent digs right now too, which we got to go into today. So I wanted to steal one of those conference chairs. Like the chairs were pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt. But
anyway.
Yeah, but and obviously there's the practice fields look a little different. They've put down new turf on the practice fields. It actually has blue and gold end zones, which I thought was sweet. I told Vince I would love it if Notre Dame Stadium went with colored the end zones. And I mean, I get it, it's tradition and all that, and I understand that. And I do love tradition, but there are some things that I don't think are ingrained into Notre Dame to the degree that they can't ever be changed. But Some people view the slanted, was it 18? There's 18 of them, and they're slanted at 42 degrees. Isn't that what it is?
Yep, and they all go towards the Golden Dome, or I believe something like that. Yeah.
I know that's cool and it means a ton, but I would not be upset if they painted the end zones and had Notre Dame in gold and then navy blue,
kind of like they did for the national championship game.
Yeah,
I think in the background. Yeah,
I think that'd be awesome. I think that'd be sweet. But I don't think they're going to do it. I just think that's probably something they're doing for practice field and camps. And stuff. But it looks sweet though,
because
I just think it pops in the end zone, dude. I just think it looks sweet in the end zones.
Yeah.
That blue and gold in the end zones. That's what I always loved about bowl games. Because they've always had that in bowl games. I've always thought that looks sweet.
Yep.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I can't disagree with you on that one.
Yeah. That's not what we talked with Marcus Freeman about.
It's not.
Those are just some of the observations we had walking in. Because Vince and I live in the same neighborhood, so it's easy to carpool together. So we're kind of walking up like, oh, look, new field. And then, oh, man, the building's coming along. But the meat and potatoes, Vince, is we got to sit down like with Marcus Freeman. The way it worked is they kind of allowed every reporter to ask 2 questions. And if we had time, we were able to ask follow-up questions. And so we'll let you know the questions that when we get to different topics, we'll let you know if it was a question that we asked. And so we'll tell, sometimes we'll read exactly what Marcus Freeman said. And other times we're just going to kind of get into just generally what he said and what it means and all that kind of stuff. And I'm very much looking forward to that.
So the first topic we're going to touch on, Brian, is a hot topic for right now, right? It's a hot topic in the media right now, and that's the USC Notre Dame, series, the rivalry, whether that's going to continue or not, and his thoughts on it, essentially. And to no surprise to me or probably anybody in the room, Marcus Freeman was all in, wants to play the game, wants the series. I believe he said something along the lines of, I want to play this game until college football is over. Like he doesn't ever want to not play this game, and he doesn't care when in the schedule that it's played.
He said, if it were up to me, we would play them every year for the rest of college football. I've never heard it put like that. He says, pretty black and white for me. You want my opinion? I want to play them every single year. When? I don't care. I want to play USC every year because I think it's great for college football. Before I got to Notre Dame, everyone watched that game. Everyone remembers moments from that game. If Pete or Ron or anyone asked me, that's how I feel. Everyone knows how I feel. And he said it. He said, I don't care if it's middle of the year, beginning of the year, end of the year. I just want to keep playing USC. Obviously, there's more to it than that. I mean, that's how a football coach should feel.
Correct.
They've got the administration, the leadership from who's the ones that got a schedule have to figure out what makes most sense for us. It's hard to do it in September because they already have a lot of early September games scheduled. I personally think they should have it at the end of the year every year. That's what I think they should do.
Agreed.
Very easy for USC to work their schedule around that. Very easy for the Big Ten to work their schedule around that. It's been tradition. Every time Notre Dame goes out there, they play UCLA on the road the week before, play Notre Dame the week after. And then they can just rotate it. The next year they can play UCLA at home and then travel to Notre Dame. And that's how it should be. But and just kind of some of it was just the body language. You could see times when he was giving you I'm just, here's the answer. And then there's other times he'd get real emotional. When he gets fired up about something, he kind of leans in.
Mm-hmm.
And he was leaned in, hitting the table, talking about USC, because it's something he's very passionate about. And it wasn't done in any way like, I want to play those bums and USC sucks. And it wasn't anything like that at all. It was just like, dude, this is great for college football. This is what makes Notre Dame is that Notre Dame USC rivalry. And it was good to see him kind of take that stance. There was no, we've got Bama coming up on the schedule and we just signed a deal with Clemson. And, 2029, we already play Clemson, Florida State, Bama, and Texas, so it may not be smart to, none of that stuff. None of that. Hey man, I don't, there was no complaining about, it's hard to get in. And, you play that kind of team every year and blah, 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 blah. And there's none of that. I mean, literally, in 2029, Notre Dame already has Alabama, Texas, Florida State, and Clemson on the schedule on top of NC State, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, Wake Forest, and Navy. And there's no hemming and hawing. Well, maybe a couple-year break wouldn't be that bad, and we can do this. Well, none of that. 2028, Notre Dame plays Texas, Arkansas, Virginia Tech on the road, Clemson, and Miami already. And it's an even year. So in an even year, Notre Dame plays at USC. Mm-hmm. No hemming and hawing, nothing about, like Lincoln Riley did. Well, it's a great rivalry, but let me give you these 87 excuses on why it doesn't make sense to play it. Screw that. Screw that. This is Notre Dame. This is what you come here for.
Right. And he didn't hesitate.
That's what I love about what you're hearing from a lot of USC alums. Not all of them feel that way. Some of them are taking the new school soft mentality, but a lot of them have the mindset of like, look, dude, this is part of why you go to USC. You can't let this series be done in by people who aren't truly invested. And I thought Petros Papadakis, I think is how you say his name, had a great take. He basically made us a comment like, you're a head coach or an AD. You're a steward of this. You're not. You aren't USC. You're a steward of the program now. It's bigger than you. And so far too many people in athletics, whether it be members of the NCAA, people in the media, presidents, ADs, and coaches, don't understand that you are not this institute. Marcus Freeman is not Notre Dame. Pete Bavacqua is not. They're stewards of the program, and they will eventually be replaced by someone else, whether they retire or for any other reason. And it was just good to see Marcus Freeman. And it doesn't surprise me that someone that played at Ohio State and has a very firm grasp of how much a rivalry like that can mean, because he played in one. Now he's coached in this one, and he gets it. And if you think about it, they've had 3 very different games. Year 1 out there, Notre Dame gets beat by a very good USC team. Year 2, Notre Dame absolutely destroys USC at home. And then year 3, it's a Notre Dame victory. But, man, it was a battle. It was a 4-quarter battle. And, no, Notre Dame never trailed that game. But USC also was driving for a tying score in the 4th quarter before Christian Gray picked it off and ran it back. So, I was very encouraged by some of what we're hearing from USC. But I was also very encouraged from Marcus Freeman on the record to talk about how important that rivalry is.
Well, and there was just no hesitation in his voice. You know what I mean? You talked about how passionate he was about it. Like, he was ready to get in. Like, he was into – there's certain things when you go into a press conference or a sit-down like this, and there's topics that you're going to anticipate they're going to get asked, right? He knew this one was going to get asked, and he jumped all over it. Like, he wanted it out there that he's all for it. Because we know that the opposing coach at USC – is out there with all of his excuses and everything else. Marcus Freeman is out there definitive. And he even said, this is black and white for me. I want to play him, period. End of discussion. Doesn't matter when, doesn't matter where we want to play. And so I just think that adds to just all of it, because you haven't really heard anything from the Notre Dame side up to this point.
Other than Pete Bavacqua's made a couple little minor comments.
Right.
But nothing like this,
man. Yeah. Like, and I love that, because it echoes what Notre Dame fans want, at least the vast majority of Notre Dame fans want. And
I may, piss some people off, but I think the real fans that understand what makes Notre Dame special.
Yeah.
Get it.
How can you not? That boggles my mind to even have that conversation with somebody that says that they don't want it. That just doesn't make any sense to me. That's where I'm at on that one. But we touched on other topics as well. And there was a question that was asked by a pretty smart guy that was in the room about the Notre Dame wide receivers. And I don't remember who that was. The name escapes me at the moment. Oh, that's right. It was you. Yeah, that's okay. My bad. So you were able to ask a question about the wide receivers. I'll let you give your exact question, and then we can talk about what that answer was by Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, so my question was kind of twofold. Number one, and by the way, somebody in the chat said Chad Bowden gets there and USC doesn't want to play Notre Dame. Guys, come on. Lincoln Riley's been talking about this for over a year. This has nothing to do with Chad Bowden.
And he bailed on Oklahoma. Like, this is in his track record.
This has nothing to do with Chad Bowden.
Right.
Come on. But the question that I asked, it was really, because like one thing I interviewed, so like now we kind of meet as a media with Marcus Freeman. It used to be we'd get a one-on-one. We're not cool enough to get that anymore. But I remember asking him in his first press conference, or my first one-on-one with him was like about his offensive philosophy. And one of the things he said was like he wants balance. And the way he explained balance was it's not 50-50 and you throw for this number of yards and you run for this number. It's like you're really good at both. And it's basically what we believe balance is, Vince. You and I have always talked about it. It's not a 50-50 split. It's you're really good at both. You can beat teams with both. and you're explosive and efficient in both. And so very much aligned philosophically with what we believe in. Now that hasn't always looked that way since Freeman's been here. Coach Freeman's been here, but we saw them try to get to that point later in the season. And, but we also know that the pass game has to get better. He knows that. We know that. That's why Notre Dame invested the time and money they did into getting, Malachi Fields and Will Pauling. So my question was kind of about that, but then also more specifically the players in the room and how they kind of play into that. And I started off asking about Jaden Greathouse and then the two transfer guys, and his comment to Jaden Greathouse, and you saw that little smirk on his face when he talked about it. He goes, what we learned and what Riley learned, and he had a little bit of a smirk on his face.
It's like they've been telling him this probably for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that when Jaden Greathouse is one-on-one, he's not covered. Even when he's covered, he's not covered. And the point he was making is, no, Jaden Greathouse is not a guy that's just going to go run away from people. He's not a Will Fuller type of athlete. We all know that. But he's got such an incredible ability to make tough catches. And we saw that in certainly in the postseason, but really all year. And since he's been at Notre Dame, and I put up a breakdown on the message board, and it's one of the many reasons to be on the message board, but I compared Jaden Greathouse's numbers to Emeka Egbuka and like all the slots that were taken in the first 3 rounds. Luther Burden, the cat from Iowa State, some different guys. And then I compared him to the expected sort of top slots coming back in college football. And what you saw is I think there's only one receiver that came anywhere close to him. I think it might've been like Tess Johnson was the only guy that came close to him in a couple categories, but his contested catch rate was over 80%. And his completion percentage when targeted was like 79.5%. And I broke his yards per target was over 11. His yards per catch was over I think it was 14, obviously. And so when I kind of compared how those numbers stack up against the best guys at his position, and so I did that breakdown. And it's not only that his numbers are good, it's his numbers blow those guys away. And that was a very interesting number. And it kind of just shows just how good he is. So you talk about the contested catch number, and I use Pro Football Focus because I don't do that breakdown for other teams. So I can only have what I have for Notre Dame. But if you compare it, for example, last year, Emeka Egbuka had a 76.4% completion percentage when targeted, which is exceptional. Like Luther Burden in 2023 was at 71.2. Only Tess Johnson was even really close to that. Everybody else is like Jalen Noel is like 67, Jalen Lane 65. You look at guys coming back in college football. Eric Singleton was 62. Kevin Concepcion 2 years ago was 66.7. Aaron Anderson at LSU 69. And you just kind of go down the list. And Jaden Greathouse is a 79.2. His 11.2 yards per target so how many yards do you gain on the season? Then how many times are you targeted? And he's at 11.2. Emeka Egbuka was at 9.5. Luther Burden 2 years ago when he was a stud was at 10.8. Looking at guys coming back this year, Eric Singleton's 8.4. Kevin Concepcion in his freshman year when he was really good was 8.0. Antonio Williams at Clemson's 9.1. Aaron Anderson at LSU's 9.9. And you go down the list, Zechariah Branch, for example, everybody talks about is 6.8. DeAndre Moore from Texas, 7.7. These are all slot guys. They're not even close to him. And then you get to the contested catch rate. And that's where you're like, wow, that's where it really changes. 84.6%. When it's a contested catch, he caught it. The next highest guy amongst the guys drafted in the first 3 rounds was Emeka Egbuka at 59.1. And then you look at guys coming back in college football next year. Jeremy Bernard at Alabama is the next closest at 74%. After that, the next closest is Caden Lee from Ole Miss at 66.7%. And that was the point that Marcus Freeman is making. It's like, dude, it's like he may be covered, but he ain't covered. If he's one-on-one, give him a chance to go make a play. And that's one of the things that I think does factor into why we expect Jaden Greathouse to maybe be more productive in the regular season next year than he was this year, is not just that. It's not just the experience, but it's like now the quarterbacks know if this guy's one-on-one, give him a chance to go make a play. And he talked about how important that was. And then, of course, we got into the transfer guys as well.
Well, and I think to Marcus's point and to your point, I think that, obviously Riley Leonard was really good at a lot of things, and then he wasn't as good at other things. And I think with whoever the quarterback is this year in 25, they're going to give Greathouse many more opportunities, I would think. Yeah. Just based on the confidence level of their throwing ability, right? I mean, I think we can all sit here and say that both Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr are more confident throwers than Riley Leonard is. And
more accurate for sure, yeah.
And so they're going to take more chances. They're going to take some more shots. And I'm not just talking shots down the field. I'm talking about smaller windows, things of that nature, right? And
not needing to be down 10-0 or 31-7 to be able to take those chances. That's the thing.
Yes, 100%. So I just feel like, Jaden Greathouse's numbers are going to improve just based on opportunity. And I think the quarterbacks are willing to give him those opportunities.
It was interesting. He talked about Will Pauling and the toughness that he brings and the focus he brings to the table every day, and didn't get a lot into the kind of player he is because he was not really 100% most of the spring. But then he got into talking about Malachi Fields.
This was very interesting.
And he said, first of all, he said, I was watching film a couple weeks ago and I text Mike Brown. He watched him throw the pass against Notre Dame and texts him and says, hey, Jordan Faison might have some competition for, who can throw. And I said, well, I said to Coach Freeman, I said, he was a quarterback in high school. He goes, he's like, yeah, I didn't know that at the time. He didn't know that. But he talked about how the toughness he plays. He goes, if you watch their film, whenever they threw a screen, they'd move him to the point of attack. So if they threw a screen in the boundary, they'd have him in the boundary. If they threw a screen into the field, they'd have him in the slot or whatever. And then he just kind of as a throwaway, he's a game changer, and right. I'm like that's the throwaway line. He's a game changer, and he talked about how if he's man to man, we think we're going to win. If they're going to play zone on him, then obviously that's going to open up some opportunities for other people. But you could just kind of see when he started talking about those guys that there's a much greater level of confidence in what they're bringing to the table this season at that position. And of course, he's like, you throw Jordan Faison into that, and it's like, you've got a kid, Jaden Greathouse, you praise his toughness. You praise Malachi Fields' toughness. You praise Will Pauling's toughness. And the only guy we haven't talked about is the lacrosse player. He's a pretty tough kid.
He kind of threw in Jordan Faison as like not an afterthought, but just kind of.
Well, I thought it was more like a don't forget about him.
Correct. Right.
I didn't ask about Jordan.
Because he didn't go into detail about him, obviously. But he's like, and then we've got Jordan Faison. Right. So it was like, hey, don't sleep on this kid.
Right.
And we actually, Sean and I kind of talked about this last night on the other show, and it was like, yes, you've got Malachi Fields and you've got Jaden Greathouse, and those are going to be kind of a pick your poison, potential alpha 1A, 1B, whatever terminology that you want to use. And then you've got Jordan Faison. And I feel like Faison has an opportunity to just fly under the radar a little bit and just make plays
which
in
is
those moments.
Which is where I think he'll be best suited.
Yes, 100%.
I don't think Jordan Faison is an alpha.
No, I don't think so.
And when I mean alpha, let me rephrase that. As an athlete, he's an alpha.
Sure.
As a wide receiver, he's not an alpha. And what I mean by that is, as an alpha, I mean his game doesn't translate to I'm going to go be a 90 catch. Like he's not Golden Tate.
Right.
Undersized guy, but still a horse. I think Jordan Faison, when he thrives, is when maybe the attention is a little bit on other people.
Right.
And, maybe you're focused on Jaden Greathouse. Maybe you're focused on Malachi, Eli Raridan, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. Now, all of a sudden, you got to play him straight up one-on-one. And that's when I think Jordan Faison can get really dangerous because, like, you have to focus on Jeremiah Love and all these other things. And now, all of a sudden, you're leaving him on one-on-ones, and he's working against a slot or working on the outside or, throwing screens to him. And all of a sudden, you're like, man, we shut Malachi Fields down with our double coverage, and Jaden Greathouse only had 3 catches for 35 yards. And then what happened to you? Why'd you lose by 30? Well, Jordan Faison caught 6 balls for 110 yards, and Eli Raridan went 4 for 80.
Right.
And then there was that one wheel route out of the backfield to Jeremiah Love that went to the house. So, I mean, and you could just kind of see that in how Coach Freeman was talking about. I was like, that there's an expectation that this receiving core is a far more proven receiving core than it was a year ago. And a year ago, Faison and Greathouse had done some nice things as freshmen, but now they're 2 years into it. Malachi Fields is a more proven player than what Bo Collins was, and Bo did some nice things for Notre Dame this year. But Malachi's a much more proven, productive player, significantly more productive player. And then, of course, what Will Pauling did 2 years ago at Wisconsin is certainly something to kind of get you excited about. But that's the thing is but he kept talking about the toughness.
Yeah.
And
he said
it wasn't in a way where it was like, like guys are not really athletic, but they're tough. It just was like, you could just tell it's a mentality that they want to have on offense.
And the fact that that's the first criteria that kind of came out of his mouth, because we've watched the film, we know who these guys are, and we know what they bring to the table from a receiving standpoint. And he's talking about their toughness, and he's like, you don't see that in wide receivers all that often. You know what I mean? And he's spent plenty of time breaking down wide receivers as a defensive coordinator and finding out where those weak spots are in the run game and all of those different things. And so I trust Marcus Freeman's opinion when he starts talking about toughness in wide receivers and whether they have it or they don't. And he's very high on the toughness quotient in this wide receiving core. And that's exciting. No doubt about it.
I still just can't. I still laugh on the throwaway about like, and that it's like such a response from a defensive coordinator, head coach. It's like, I mean, I know he's a game changer and he's, and all this. And it's like, he didn't want to talk about that. He want to talk about his toughness and screens. Right. And I'm just like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to me as a coach, it makes sense. But I'm like, but that's not a sexy quote for me to give to the people, coach. You're killing me here. But you could just kind of see like there's that mentality that they want to have. But I mean, that's what you want, though. It's like you got a young quarterback, and whoever starts is going to, be a young first-time starting quarterback. You want some guys that bring sort of that. If I'm and that was the one consistent thing on top of the toughness was multiple times he said, if we're one-on-one with this guy, we like it. If they're going to go one-on-one with this guy, we like it. He talked about that with Jaden Greathouse. He talked about that with Malachi. That's a really nice thing for a young quarterback to have. And I don't know that they really had that last year, or at least Riley didn't know that he had that last year. And where it's like, hey, look, if this guy's one-on-one, I don't care, what the read tells you, or we're okay taking that opportunity. You're never wrong throwing to that guy. You're throwing an accurate ball, but you're never wrong throwing to that guy. And the young guys are going to need guys like that. And the fact that there's more than one of those type of guys is going to be important. So the fact that he without necessarily prompting that aspect of the discussion, I think it is going to bode well for the new young quarterbacks.
I do want to mention this before we move on to the next topic. I wrote down a bunch of notes, obviously, and things that stuck out to me as we were talking, things like that. And one thing that I wrote down when he was talking about Jaden Greathouse that I just wanted to get out there was he said, Jaden is obsessed with improvement.
Yeah.
Like, what else do you need, man? Like, that is what you absolutely want from every player, obviously, on your roster. But to single him out and say that he's obsessed with improvement, like, that struck a chord with me, because he's not going to be complacent. He's not going to be happy with where he was and the way he finished off the season last year, because he finished off the season in a very high note. You know what I mean? Like, he couldn't have finished any better personally than he did. And the fact that he goes into the offseason, he goes into the spring, he goes into the summer obsessed with improvement, like, that gets me excited about the potential and the future of Jaden Greathouse and who he's going to be, not only to that room, but to the team and to the young quarterbacks, right? Yeah. He's obsessed with improvement. I just love that quote. I had to bring that up.
If I could give one bit of advice to Cam Williams and say, what can Cam Williams do to get better? If Cam Williams called and asked me, he wouldn't, because I don't know Cam Williams, but I'm just making a point. If his high school coach or his mom called me and said, hey, what advice do you give Cam to get better? I'd say spend every second that you possibly can working out with Jaden Greathouse. If Jaden Greathouse is out on the field, you're out on the field. Right. If Jaden Greathouse is in the film room, you're in the film room. If Jaden Greathouse is in the weight room, you're in the weight room. Like, you need to be on him like Leonard Moore is on a go route. I mean, that's how you need to be. Like, you are in his hip pocket, because that's the thing is like that is why we talk about like Jaden Greathouse being a leader and and potentially being a junior year captain is because of that right there.
Right.
And I've heard that from other people that like soon as Jaden Greathouse got back from the title game, it wasn't like, look how well I did, give me all my new NIL deals. It was like, hey, how do I get better? Because I don't want to lose this game next year. Because this is a kid that has not lost a lot in his life. When you look at the success he had as a high school player as well. And you need guys, and they've got a lot of guys like that, but he is absolutely one of those guys.
Yeah. And this team is going to be looking for leaders, obviously, going into next year and what that looks like, who's going to be captain and all of that. I mean, there was a lot of leadership that graduated. And so now it's time for the next group to step up. You know what I mean? And I think Jaden Greathouse is kind of tip of the spear there in that next group. So that's an exciting piece of it for sure.
For sure.
Another piece of information that kind of came out, in this little sit down with Marcus Freeman, we talked about defense and talked about the defensive line and the things of that. And I believe this was your question, if I'm not mistaken, Brian. I believe it was your question about the depth.
And then I asked the follow up on it as well.
Right. So it was the depth of the defensive ends and what that's going to look like and things like that. And it was kind of off the cuff, just kind of a throw in, and everybody was like, whoa. They're kind of changing the way they're calling their defensive end. So they're going to go from a Viper big end situation to a left-right defensive end situation. So I'll let you expound on that a little bit, because you did also ask the follow-up question, because he just kind of threw it in the original question about depth and all of that. And then you asked, why? Why are you guys doing this?
Because like my overall point was, it was an interesting year at defensive end.
Sure.
I mean, by the end of your fifth game, you're down 2 guys, including your starter at Viper and then his replacement at Viper. And then that forced Junior Chilamaka into a role he hadn't had that up to that point in time. I mean, as I mentioned in the discussion with Coach, like that kid played 0 snaps first 2 games. And then he becomes a very important part of what you're doing. You get the injuries also played a role in Bryce Young playing a lot more, maybe a little bit earlier than you expect, because it wasn't just those 2 guys. But remember, Josh Burnham got hurt against Northern Illinois, and he didn't come back, I think, until the Stanford game. Or it was the Louisville game, but he didn't play much against Louisville, and then he played a lot more against Stanford. So he missed the part of the Northern Illinois game. He missed all the Purdue game, all the Miami game, and then most of the Louisville game, which thrust all these younger guys into the role. And now what the experience that they have. And he talked about the expectations for Boubacar and Jordan to be healthy. And obviously Burnham's the guy that's right. And then he throws in Logan Thomas. And I'm like, I would love to talk about Logan Thomas, but we didn't see him all spring. So I don't know what to ask about that.
Right.
But he just kind of talked about how, the depth and the versatility. And then he mentioned, they're going to be doing more left and right this year. And I wish I had another follow-up question, because, it was very structured, because I wanted to find out, are you going to do the same thing at corner? And he didn't, obviously I didn't get a chance to ask that, but I asked him, my follow-up was, is this an adjustment in scheme? Is this personnel driven? A little bit of both. And the comment he made is it's personnel driven, meaning they think the guys going into the rotation this year can do everything. There's no guys like when you look at, in Josh Burnham played both Viper and big end last year, but Boubacar played big end and Viper last year. Jordan Patelhos played both positions in certain situations. Bryce Young is a guy that they think could play either side. Logan Thomas is more probably kind of a traditional guy, but the point was, left to right, you got to be able to do it all. And we have guys can do it all. So we don't have to be as focused on switching ends and things like that to really know who's going to be where. And I like it. I don't have a problem with it at all. I prefer it to be that way. It just gives your defense a little bit more versatility, makes you a little bit better prepared to handle movement. What I mean by that movement is if I'm the Viper and I may not have as much experience against, the whole point is you're playing field boundary. Part of playing field boundary is there's a lot of times there's certain formational tendencies and run game tendencies that people have. Teams tend to be more, I don't know why, but teams tend to be more focused on running into the boundary. Teams tend to put the strength of their formation at times more where they have more field work. And so a lot of times, it's not always, but in a lot of instances, you'll get your big end is lined up against a tight end a lot more than your Viper will be. But then also, where a guy is going to be, and you can kind of motion to it. Well, now, Vince, when you look at it, it's more left-right is, hey, this play you may be in the boundary, the next play you may be on the field. You have more responsibility, but it's also now I have more I can do with both of my ends. Because whereas the big end last year was just a pure set the edge, rush the quarterback guy, now what he's saying is like that guy has to be capable of dropping into coverage because sometimes he may be in the boundary. He may be on the short side of the field, but they have players that can do that. And so I thought that was very interesting that they're making that adjustment. And then he said it's personnel driven. It's because
and he was very clear on
that
that.
We have on that.
Like there was no hesitation when you asked that follow-up question about why they were doing it. Because I actually kind of anticipated, well, with a new defensive coordinator, Chris Ash wants to try this out, or something along those lines, kind of not a vague answer, but just more of a schemed answer.
Right.
And he's like, oh, no, it's personnel driven. Like we have dudes and we're going to use them.
And it's not surprising that this is happening. I've talked about this on the recruiting trail, Vince, how that's kind of the type of players they've been recruiting. And that's something that I've been hearing from some different sources in the recruiting trail, that they're telling recruits that that's the direction they've wanted to go for the last couple of years. So it's not overly surprising. And we've talked about this before. We've talked about it with corners. We've talked about it with edge players. The other thing I like about it is practically speaking, is it really helps you be, because like if you're a field boundary guy, when a team's going tempo or it's 2 minutes, you have one of two options. One is you can just say, okay, now we're going to play left to right because we don't have time to switch. Or you can say, hey, we're going to still try to switch. We just got to do it quickly. Now you got guys kind of switching sides. You're getting checks and calls made. It just makes it a little bit harder to get lined up. When you're field boundary, and this guy is more in this kind of role, if I motion to that guy, it now switches the strength. And maybe this guy's not as used to that. You got to know everything now, and it just makes you better prepared to be able to say, hey, look, the Viper can easily bump out if you're trying to get, make sure you're staying in a 9 technique. And the defensive end can bump out. Because that's another thing that we've talked about on the show, is we expect them to have a little bit more wider techniques this year, and maybe be more forced players on the edge than they were spill. Right. Like last year, they were a lot more spill players. Not all the time, but there was a lot more of that. And spill means you're basically bouncing it outside, and that's where the safeties and the rover or the nickel and the corners make a lot of plays. Force means you're trying to force everything back inside, just a technique on how you play, the angle you're going to play, where you're trying to send the back. And it's one of the reasons why I think Notre Dame's linebacker is going to make a lot more plays this year, is because of how I expect them to use their defensive linemen to be more attacking and try to make them, because like last year, the linebackers were used a lot to they were gap fillers. And this plays into the notion of them allowing the linebackers to play to the ball a little bit more, as opposed to
being athletes. Coming down
look, linebackers have to be gap conscious, but there's a difference in gap conscious and saying your job is to simply just get into this gap, and if the ball comes there, you make a play. And so it was good to see that. It's not surprising, but it was good to hear that they're going that direction.
Next topic we want to touch on is a question that was asked by yours truly. And it was a question about the offensive line, and it was specifically tailored towards Charles Jagasaw. And because there's been a lot of talk about, okay, where is Charles Jagasaw the best? We've seen him at guard be dominant. We've seen him at tackle be dominant. What's best for him? What's best for the team? All of these different conversations that we've had. I figure, what the heck? Let's ask Marcus Freeman what went into the decision of having Charles Jagasaw at guard throughout spring and presumably into the fall, right? And what that looks like and why. And I really liked his answer, Brian. I thought his answer was spot on. He basically said, look, we're looking for our best 5. Mm-hmm. And once we find our best 5, we're going to slot them into what makes the most sense to help the team. And he said, look, Charles Jagasaw is a freak. Like, those are his words. Charles Jagasaw is a freak. He's freaking.
Well, you didn't even ask him about Charles Jagasaw's talent. You just asked what went into the position he's going to play. And then he starts raving about Charles Jagasaw as a player, which I thought was interesting.
He said he was a freak. He said he could play center, he could play guard, he could play tackle. And he goes, guard may not even be his best position, but it's the position that helps Notre Dame the most when we're looking for our best 5. I can't argue with that. Like, I think that's a really, really good answer because that is what you're trying to do. Because if you're going to put, Charles Jagasaw in where you think he is the best, like his best position, that's one thing. But then you might weaken yourself as a team at another position because you don't have somebody that's as good there. So you're going to move him and rotate, put guys in the best position to help the team. Notre Dame could potentially have one of the best offensive lines in the country.
Athlon Sports thinks so.
There you go.
Ranked number one in their preseason magazine.
I didn't want to be too black and white on it, but they have the opportunity.
But Vince, it's Notre Dame. The expectation is that you should
absolutely.
And I get why it wasn't the expectation last year.
No,
when you're going into the season with basically 5 new starters.
Correct.
Once they decided to go with Pendleton over Rocco, you're basically going into the season with 5 new starters.
Correct. For sure. And so, but I really like this answer because they're looking at it from a big picture standpoint.
He got fired up talking about Jay. Well, and then he also made the comment where was this the comparison that Denbrock made? Was that during this segment?
It was because I already wrote about it.
Make sure.
If you want to look at the thing, it's in there.
I got you.
Yeah.
He started talking about how that was about Jagasaw.
Mm-hmm.
He starts talking about how Mike Denbrock compared him to Will Campbell,
right?
Who was the number 4 overall draft pick of the New England Patriots. But Will Campbell's a left tackle. Charles Jagasaw's playing right guard.
Right.
But his answer made sense, and this is something that we've talked about. And you and I were actually talking about this last night, Vince. I think it was you and I last night. But it's like the conversation with like Anthony Knapp. It's not so much who's better at left tackle, Anthony Knapp or Charles Jagasaw. Because I think the answer is Charles Jagasaw.
I do too.
Who's and I know that there's other people in the building that feel that way too. He's bigger, he's older. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. Who's better at right guard? Is it Charles Jagasaw or Sullivan Absher or Christopher Tarrick? It's Charles Jagasaw. So the question isn't Knapp versus Jagasaw. The question is more so Knapp versus Absher or Tarrick or whoever else, or Knapp versus Jagasaw is if you're talking about being interchangeable with those and trying to get your best 5 and the best parts, do you feel like Anthony Knapp can play at a level at left tackle that allows you to thrive there, and with knowing that Jagasaw can be an elite player at guard, or like yes, Knapp can play inside, but do you feel that Jagasaw is even better at left tackle than he is at right guard, or do you feel he's even better at right guard than left tackle? And then where do you feel Knapp is best, and just fitting them all together? And that's the reason that I liked how you asked it that way, Vince, because it's not so much you're not saying, well, why wouldn't you play Charles Jagasaw at left tackle? That wasn't the question. It was what went into the decision to move him when you consider that the only 2 games he's ever started are at left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And not once was he like, talk about other player. It was just about what's the best group of 5 that you can get on the field together. And like, look, Charles Jagasaw is playing somewhere. He's going to be a stud somewhere.
Correct.
But where can we be most effective?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think the Penn State game almost sealed it for Charles Jagasaw. I honestly don't know that. And let me explain that. This is my opinion. This isn't what Coach Freeman said. But I feel like when they watched how dominant he was at times in that game, having not played, he had just gotten cleared like 2 weeks before. He gets thrust into the lineup because we were talking. He's like, we're like trying to figure out what was the order again of guys getting hurt. And it was like, no, Knapp went out first. Then Tosh came in. And then like 2 series later, Rocco goes down on the same play that Riley got hurt. And then Jagasaw went in. So you've got this new look offensive line. And there was a couple assignment mistakes from Jagasaw. But even on those, like the one we talk about a lot, he made a big mistake is he pulls and just lights up the nickel. But he did the wrong thing. He was going the opposite direction of everybody else. So Jardarian Price is getting tackled for a 4-yard loss. But it was just like, dude, did you see the hit that he put on that guy? And so I think the thought was, look, if he's better than Anthony Knapp at left tackle, and he's better than whoever we have at right guard, two things go into the equation is where might he be best? And Coach Freeman talked about that. We've got to look into where that is. But with him, I got the impression from what he said, I have to go back and read it again, that like they didn't really have a preference for him at either spot, or at least Freeman didn't. And I don't think Denbrock does. It was more so, like you said, if you move him and then move Knapp here, does that give you a better, opportunity than keep Knapp there and move Jagasol here?
Right.
And it sounds like they felt as a 5 that it worked better with Jagasol here and then Knapp playing where he played last year. And now you don't got to teach him something new. You're teaching Jagasol something new, but it's not even new because he played it last in the playoff. But remember, going into the postseason, they tried to move him to guard as a freshman. Like Rudolph's been dying to move Charles Jagasol to guard. I think people on the staff may view Jagasol more of a tackle than Joe Rudolph does. Because remember when he played against Stanford in 2023 as a freshman, they brought him in as a guard. And then he went out in the bowl prep and he was just so good that they couldn't not start him. So I think that almost with Joe Rudolph's eyes, the way he played against Penn State sealed the deal. Like he's going to be a guard. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as like that. See, like to Joe Rudolph, it's confirmation. Like, see, I think this guy can be a special guard.
Just like a dominating interior is what they're looking at right now.
It's not like I don't like Charles Jagasol, so I'm going to move him to guard. It's it's like
it's a great problem to have, Brian. Like that's
exactly
that's where they're at. We've all had kids, at whatever level that you're on. We've all had kids that I could put this kid here and he's going to be really good, or I could put this kid here and he's going to be really good. You just have to find the best spot for them that's going to most positively affect your team and based on the other guys around them, right? So like if you have two, just as an example, right? You got two kids that are really good quarterbacks, right? And they're both athletes and whatever. And so you put the one kid at quarterback. Well, there's only one quarterback on the field. And so you're going to put the other kid someplace else, and he's probably going to be really good too. Now, I'm talking like high school and like that kind of a thing. It's just an example. That this kid's going to be really good in one position. He's going to be really good at another position. But how does it help your team? Because maybe the other kid isn't going to be as good at the other position. And so that's why you move guys around and you put them where you think that the best going to help the team. Charles Jagasol is going to be successful at whatever position he gets put at in the NFL. You're right. I mean, maybe he gets drafted higher if he's considered a tackle as opposed to a guard, that kind of thing.
It just depends on how dominant you are, because Quentin Nelson got drafted in the same spot that Ronnie Stanley did.
Right, exactly.
So, but I mean, I think that's kind of what they think he could be. We got to see it. He started 2 games in his career.
Right.
But you could just see it when Marcus Freeman was talking about Charles Jagasol, like, look, this kid, like he called him a freak, and he starts talking about how, the Will Campbell comparison and all that. But you could see that there's excitement about what he can do. And look, I'll just tell you all just what I'm told, that there's a lot of excitement from people I've talked to about what this offensive line is going to be could be next season.
Could be, sure.
With everybody healthy, because now it's like you're starting Anthony Knapp at left tackle because you choose to, not because you have to, like you did last year.
Yeah.
And you're starting Charles Jagasol right guard because he went out and showed that to you.
Right.
No, I shouldn't say right guard. You're starting him at guard. I don't know if they're going to have him a right guard. They may move him over to the left. I mean, we've seen Joe Rudolph do that, where in the spring guys are playing one spot, and then in the fall they're playing another. And like Rocco was playing left guard in the spring, and then he moved to right guard in the fall and last year and all these other type of things. And so and he played right guard obviously the year before, and so like they can move him around. But the point is, I personally wouldn't mind seeing Jagasol and Knapp side by side. I've said this before. I think those are your 2 best run blockers. That's my preference. But as I also said, like I understand having your 2 best run blockers on opposite sides. But either way, they
got a chance to be really, really good.
And they're expecting 56 to be a really dominant player.
Right. No doubt about that. So my second question, we all got 2 questions. So my second question is next on our list. And I wanted to ask Marcus Freeman because, we talk about position groups and we talk about ones we're more confident in than others. And we talk about injuries and all of those different things. And one of the position groups that we've talked about a bunch when it comes to the depth chart and injuries and just legacy at Notre Dame is the tight end position, and specifically Eli Raridan, who is, penciled in as the number 1 tight end. And what we saw from him in the spring, obviously healthy, athletic, able to do a lot of different things. And so what I asked Marcus Freeman was, what is your expectation of Eli Raridan as a staff? Like where are you thinking that he is going? What are you thinking he's going to do maybe in the long term as, tight end you and all of those things, but more specifically 2025? And the first word out of his mouth, game changer.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so we all think Eli Raridan's going to be pretty good.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting. I'm going to read his comment because it was game changer and all this, and then immediately went into the buts.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting. This is what he said, a game changer, right? He said he has continued to progress to be a complete tight end. He has to stay healthy. That's been Eli's biggest nemesis in his first 3 years. There's always something that has kept him from practicing and playing. I think he has a high ceiling. He just needs to continue to put it together and be a complete tight end. He has gotten high praise from Denbrock, who he has coached some of the best tight ends Notre Dame has had. And even when we were at Cincinnati, he had 2 NFL drafted tight ends. He's got a high ceiling and he's progressing, but he has to he's got to stay healthy and continue to be consistent in all phases of playing tight end. Potential and consistency are 2 different things. He needs to continue to be more consistent, but he has that high potential. And you could see it in his face as he started talking about Eli Raridan. It's like he had a shift in his, like, immediately jumps into, and then you could just kind of see him almost like his body language was kind of like, okay, but let me walk this back a minute and remind you guys of, or, even because, like, look, Marcus Freeman's a smart guy. And Brian Kelly was good about this too. He understands that what I'm going to say here is going to get read by whatever player I'm talking about. They know that. So I'm delivering this message through the media to remind you, because now it's out there, that, look, this kid could be, and you could just see it like game changer. But he's got to prove it now. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to be able to battle through some stuff, and not battle through some stuff that because he didn't say that, but be healthy, be out there, be on the field, do all those things, and then also be a more complete player, because he's got the talent to be a complete tight end. Now he's just got to be consistent enough, and you've seen that from Eli in his career, Vince. It's like sometimes the pass game is thriving, sometimes the run blocking is thriving, and then sometimes that other side is not as good. And there's been a lot of excitement within the staff from the moment he got to Notre Dame. Just the first time he got cleared, because remember, he got hurt in December, and there's always like, man, this guy's got freakish ability, and then boom, injury. Boy, this guy's coming along, boom, injury.
I know.
And that was the thing that Coach Freeman was talking about, is like, look, guy's got all the potential. And I've talked to a couple other people inside the program, but believe me, there's a lot of thought that if he stays healthy, he's going to be a monster this year. But that's the big thing, is he's got to prove to stay healthy. And last year's the first year he's done that. That's the hope, is like, look, he was healthy last year. Now hopefully he can continue to be that way.
Well, I remember, when he was when he committed to Notre Dame, and when he signed with Notre Dame, and all of those different things. And you saw all these highlights of him on the basketball court, just like, just dunking over dudes and just being just super athletic. I mean, you remember that, right? I mean, it was like, this kid's athletic. Like, I cannot wait to see what he does on a football field based on what I'm seeing him do, obviously on the football field in high school, but also the basketball court. You know what I mean? Like, he was just a stinking athlete. And then he just couldn't stay away from the injury bug. And, we saw some flashes of that in the spring. You know what I mean? We saw him take that screen pass. We saw him do some different things in the spring game. Like, we have seen some Eli Raridan that gets people really, really excited. And you could tell when I asked the question, Marcus Freeman's very high on Eli Raridan, what he has the potential of being, but he also knows he needs to do this, and this in order to reach that potential. So he was excited about it. He wanted to talk about it, but he also knew, okay, I got to pump the brakes here a little bit too, just because of the history and everything else.
I felt like the pumping the brakes was a reaction to what he was saying at first.
Yeah, right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I felt like
he started getting kind of fired up. I'm actually going to pull up the couple of those plays we're talking about from basketball.
Oh, you find those? That would be impressive if you can find those that quickly. But
You know me, buddy.
There we go.
Talking about, you could see he was excited about it, but then you could see him shift like, okay, hold on a second. Let me pump the brakes a little bit on this. So that I thought that was an interesting part of that, because he was an all-state basketball player.
I mean, he looked pretty dominant.
Yeah, I mean, he
right
was
there.
he wasn't just some guy that was on the team and
right
averaged a couple boards because he's tall. I mean, he was a first-team all-state basketball player. So
right,
like, he's one of those guys that I feel like with a lot of people around Notre Dame is like they want to be excited about him, but they also, I feel like there's a hesitancy to build around, like to put too much into,
sure,
he's going to be the guy, because what if you put all this emphasis on building around him, and then all of a sudden, he's down again.
Right. Well, it's like a fool me once, shame on me kind of, you know what I mean? It's like,
it's just
been
about
burned
being
before.
Prepared.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to be prepared, and it's hard to kind of really dive into a guy that, that's going to be that way. So, but you could just tell, like there's a lot of people that know that if this kid can stay healthy, that he's going to be a really big time football player.
I mean, like he's running the floor as a tight end, with the basketball in his hand, and I don't know. I remember watching these when he was a recruit, thinking to myself, okay, this is a Notre Dame tight end that you can get excited about,
Right.
So,
because as you can see, he's not just dunking here because he's tall. I mean, he's elevating.
I mean, he's elevating. Yeah, he's getting above. He's playing above the rim.
He's getting off the ground quick. Right.
Correct.
Right.
He's an athlete.
Right. Yeah, he's not barely getting it over the rim and all that kind of stuff. This is a kid that's
like this right here. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. He's a talented kid, but and look, if he can be healthy. That's the thing, Vince. This is going to have a major impact on this football team, because if you have a 6'7", like he's not as smooth as Mitchell Evans was, and he's got to prove that he has Mitchell Evans' hands, because that's the one thing about Mitchell Evans. He can catch the ball, and he was real smooth. Eli's more explosive. He's a lot faster. He's more vertically oriented. I mean, he's a guy that can bring some big play. Just you can go out, run guys up the seam. That he's got a lot of tools. I mean, you can just see it in a lot of people's voices, or hear in a lot of people's voices, and you can even see it in Marcus Freeman's body language as you're asking the question. It's like, this kid's there, he's draining threes. There's a lot of hope that this kid can be what they've seen. Because it's not, they're not excited about it because what they see on this film right here. They're excited about it because of what they've seen on the practice field and in games as well.
Sure.
But they know what this guy can be.
Yeah.
And we've tried to tell people, like, Vince, you were at the Jersey scrimmage, right? Weren't you? I mean, you just remember that catch and run he had.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Like where he's making dudes miss in space.
Yeah. Just outrunning guys, making guys miss. I mean, catching the ball in traffic. Like, it's like, oh, I remember that guy. Like, I hope he can continue to do that in the fall, because he will be an absolute weapon on this. So yeah, that was, again, cautiously optimistic, and I understand where the coaching staff is coming from based on the history and everything. I get it, but if he can maintain where he's at right now, man, let's go.
He was playing in the the basketball thing they have over by the
bookstore.
Yeah, he was playing in that.
Okay.
If I was Marcus Freeman and I heard he was playing in that, I'd have been like that dad that when you find out your kid's doing something he's not supposed to do. Right. I mean, your dad, right? Your kid's over here hanging out with this group. What do? You get in your car. Get in the car, son. Get in the car, boy, right now. Like that'd have been me. Eli, get in the car. Like, we're going to talk about it later. Don't make me do this in front of your friends now. Get in the car. You know what I mean? Like that, like playing basketball. What's wrong with you, man? Like, I taught you better than that. You know what I mean? Do you not remember what happened last time? But the kid's just, like you said, he's a freaky athlete. But it's also a good thing when I heard that, because clearly Eli is confident in his knee.
Yeah.
He hasn't always been in his knee. I mean, you could see it at times after it's not after the first injury, but when he hurt it again as a freshman. Like, you could see him, there's some hesitancy in 2023 from him to make cuts.
Sure.
He's not playing in the bookstore basketball league games. I mean, you're like, he's clearly confident in his knee, which is a great sign. Great sign.
A few more topics we want to get to, Brian, before we turn it over to the mailbag, which is filling up quickly. Marcus Freeman there is a person on the staff that has been a lightning rod, I would say, for the last year, more so at the beginning of the season than the end of the season. But a lightning rod negatively, a lightning rod positively, depending on how you look at it and what your thoughts are.
It wasn't even his fault. It was
not even a little bit his fault. He's not a lightning rod because of anything he did. It's just like the fans decided to be like narrowed in.
Well, but it was a go ahead and talk about what you're talking about, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, no. So I'm referring to Anthony Tresh, I believe is how you say his name. I want to make sure I get that right. But he's the analytics guy that is on the staff, and Marcus Freeman was asked about him and kind of his role, where things are, because it's been about a year since he came on staff. So, like, what does that
right before the season last year? It was like late in the year.
Yeah, so
we'll find out when that was.
What is his role specifically? What does that look like? During the offseason, during the game, during the actual season itself, like what does the week leading up to a game look like? All of those different things. And so he was able to kind of explain that.
It was August. It was during fall camp.
During fall camp.
They hired him last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well,
so he was asked about Anthony Tresh and he was able to kind of expound on his role.
Yeah. And he talked about how we'll meet 3-4 times a week. And basically like the plan with him is almost like you do with any other coach and what you do with your coordinators is you prepare during the week on what we're going to do in these situations. Like what are our and it's going to vary from team to team.
Correct.
And he's not just like, they didn't hire this guy to tell Marcus Freeman when he's going to go for it on fourth down. There's a lot that goes into the analytics part, offense, defense, fourth down, type of punts. I mean, there's all types of things that go into that. And basically what Marcus Freeman said was his job is to tell me every play is, based on kind of what we've discussed, is this a go situation or not, or whatever the case may be. And he just talked about how it's like with anything else. It's not just looking at the chart. It's partly also what we've game planned for. Right. What we've talked about and all those type of things. And so
he says all the work happens before Saturday. And he was very, very,
which is how it is with coordinators and play callers and position coaches. Like you don't just decide, I feel like rotating my running back now.
Right.
There's a plan that goes into it coming into a game.
Absolutely. And one of the things that first of all, he basically said, at the beginning of the week, we're kind of reviewing the weekend's games, not only Notre Dame's game and how things went and the decisions that were made, but other games across college football, games in the NFL,
and games that they're going to be playing as well.
Yeah, situations and things like that. And what would you have done? And they have that conversation, that back and forth, so that you can know each other and you can know, not only what the book says, quote unquote, but like what is your personality when it comes to making these calls? So like these guys have to know each other because Brian, you can attest to this. Play calling is an art. It's not a science. Like you can see a person's personality in the way they call a game, right? I mean, you just can. Right. So you got to know how that works. So that's what they do at the beginning of the week. And then at the end of the week, it gets more into specific game planning towards this team and who they're going to play and what that looks like. And they get everything on paper moving forward.
Yeah. And now I think too, is when he got hired on like about August 10th. So when they played Northern Illinois on September 6th, and this is when it started to he started to be focused and kind of people going at him a little bit, is because there were just that interaction with him and Marcus Freeman that was so awkward.
Right.
And almost like he's looking at him and trying to, and when you listen to Marcus Freeman describe what his role is, you can understand like maybe they weren't on the same page a whole lot, or maybe he wasn't as comfortable with what he was doing, or because he hadn't even been there a whole month.
Right.
Or just by the end of the year, that interaction. That was a whole different type of deal.
Right.
That it's like knowing when to speak, knowing when not to speak, knowing when what to say. Like there's just all that goes into it. I mean, anyone that's been an assistant coach knows.
Bingo.
You don't just sit there and talk to your play caller the whole game. Hey, coach, I did. Look, there's a time and a place when you're supposed to be saying this, and all these, just
when you're on a headset with a coach, I've been on headsets with multiple head coaches, multiple play callers, etc. I've been a play caller, and you got to learn. And same thing, honestly, the same thing goes when I'm calling games with Sean Stiers. Like you learn when you need to talk and when not to talk, right? It's the same thing when you're on a headset with a coach. Like some coaches like to hear opinions and they like you to talk. Some coaches want you to shut the hell up and
until you're asked.
Yeah, right.
You speak when spoken to. Yeah,
seriously. But you got to learn that.
And it's different for different coaches.
Correct.
So when I was at Duquesne as the pass game coordinator, I was more consistent in what I said. At Muhlenberg, it was I spoke when I was asked a question.
Right.
Or if I had a question.
Right.
And so because I was just the running backs coach at Muhlenberg. At Duquesne, I was more of the coach and I are talking and I'm, hey, coach, we got 3rd and 6. They've been covered 2 all series. Or, hey, sometimes I'd input, hey, we need to go this here. And sometimes he'd ask my opinion. It's different roles for different people.
Right.
And you've got to understand that. And
I don't think they had that
takes time.
Out. Yeah, exactly.
Time to develop that relationship. And by the end of the season, it was a little bit different.
Yeah. And another kind of a drop in that he said, and I would have loved to have a follow-up on this, and I didn't really think about it until after the fact. But he said that he is also involved in some personnel decisions from an analytics standpoint, and like how they kind of go about using some different personnel based on analytics.
Like 11, 12 personnel.
Yeah.
Nickel here, that type of stuff.
I thought that was interesting too. So he's got his hands
that's more
on
like breaking things down. Like this team is on 3rd and this. They are very heavy this and things like that. So
so I thought that was interesting.
You're not paying a guy enough money to get him to leave Pro Football Focus.
That's fair.
Just tell him whether you should or shouldn't go for it on 4th down.
I mean, fair.
He's got a lot more to it than that.
One of the first questions that was asked during our little roundtable discussion was just about the culture at Notre Dame, and we've talked a lot about Marcus Freeman, who he is, what he brings to the table from a culture standpoint, and you can, when you talk to the players and when you talk to the coaching staff, I mean, you can tell that there's a good culture there. But college football is different than professional football, but professional football is seeping into college football, right? I think we can all agree on that with NIL. So the question that was asked was, how do you maintain the culture that you want with NIL being a part of the conversation? Like, how do you do that? And I thought his answer was very, very interesting when it comes to that, Brian.
I mean, the point he made was, and I'm gonna be careful because I'm trying to remember which part was on and which part was off the record. But
it was so basically what he said was money has nothing to do with the culture.
Right.
It's like the culture is what you feel when you walk in the door to the locker room, and the culture is something. And I want to remember the exact phraseology that he used, but he basically said culture is non-negotiable. Like this is who we are and this is what we do. Money doesn't come into play. We don't treat anybody any differently based on how much money they make. Once you walk in the locker room, we're a team. And that's the culture.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing to say and a much harder thing to implement, in my opinion.
Yeah. Here's what he said. He said there's a lot of similarities between what college football is becoming in the NFL. I still think culture wins in the NFL like I do. I think if you look at some of the successful franchises and organizations in the NFL, is still culture. And so because they're making money like that, it has no difference on the culture. You are creating an ability. The money you make is the money you make. When you walk into our building, the culture is like what you should feel is the culture. And Macy, man around here, what is the man around here? And that's how we operate around here. It doesn't matter how much money you make. You're not treated that way. You're not treated any differently, no matter if you're making more money than this person. That's what I believe in. Like the culture is what you could tell you what our culture is. It doesn't matter. It's like what they feel. It's like what you feel when you're in the building, and what you feel is not going to be determined by how much money you make. And basically saying like, look, whether you're making 50 grand as a freshman, you have a breakout, now you're making $1 million as a sophomore, that doesn't change. The expectations are what they are.
Right.
And your ultimate goal is we're doing this. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to be part of that, then you can take off.
And that's a tough thing to build.
It is very tough
with you, because especially in this. So it's a good question, because in this day and age, that is a tough thing to walk in the door and establish. And he didn't establish it just walking in the door, right? This is something that has developed over his 3 years. And now you're looking at a situation, Brian, where guys don't want to leave. They're not jumping in the portal. They're not leaving regardless of money and playing time. Like they want to be a part of this culture. They want to be a part of what Marcus Freeman has built and is building. And now that he's there, you got to keep building it. You got to keep working it. But now that it's there, it's like the culture is what it is when you walk in the door, folks. Like, this is what we are. This is who we are. And
but you got to recruit the right people to that.
100%.
This is what I try to tell people, guys. If a player will only pick your school because you gave him more money than everybody else, then that's going to be the driver of everything he does. That's not a great locker room guy. That's also the guy that you have to then re-recruit every year, and it's the same thing. It could be going great for him, but hey, if you don't pay me what they're paying me, I'm out.
Right.
That's not what we're talking. Now, does that mean that a kid could be all in on the culture, but he's leaving because of money? Of course, if he's making $100,000 in Notre Dame and another school offers him $1.5 million, and Notre Dame's like, no, you agreed to $100,000, I'm out. Like, that's common sense. That goes from a nice salary to life-changing money in certain instances, especially, and like,
sure. So
like, that's important, but like, I'm not going to, if I'm making $5 at Notre Dame and you're offering me $750, I'm not going to be like, match it or I'm out, That's the difference. And I can assure you that there's a lot of players at Notre Dame that stayed at Notre Dame this offseason who got offered significantly more money to go other places. That's not meaning Notre Dame's not paying them with Big Mac gift cards, but they're not saying, if you don't match me or get within 95%, I'm out of here. It's not like that. And that's because of the kids that you recruited into the program. Right. That's got to continue to be a part of it. And that's why I think the portal can be dangerous if you're bringing in mass players, because you don't have the time to build the relationships with players in the portal the same way you do with players in high school. So like when Al Washington gets a commitment from Rodney Dunham, you've been recruiting Rodney Dunham for almost 2 years. You know him, you know his family, you know his siblings, you know his aunts and uncles, you know his principal, you know his guidance counselor, like, all those people. And like when CJ Carr finally arrives at Notre Dame, you'd been recruiting this kid for 3 years.
Right.
Whereas Riley Leonard, you'd been recruiting for 2 weeks. Now, you then have to rely on what other people are telling you about this young man, but the reality is it's risky, especially when you're doing it from a volume standpoint. What helps Notre Dame, because the numbers are so small, is they can then focus on, okay, we need a receiver. Let's focus on these guys. Who fits our room? Look, we got these people breaking down the film. We need you doing the background checks on this and making sure that the fit is there. And if it's all about, hey, coach, I'm getting offered $1 million here. If you don't give me 1.2, I'm going to go over there. All right, well, we're offering you 8.5, 8.5, or 8.50. Yeah, but you're not. I'm going to the school that's going to pay me the most. That's not a guy that you necessarily want to get,
right?
Because that's his MIT. You know what I mean? And that's what you want to avoid guys like that as best you can. Sometimes you're like, look, I don't care. He's a mercenary. He's a freaking stud nose tackle, and we're just going to put him there for 25 snaps a game and want you to destroy people. And I don't care that you're not bought it. I get that there's sometimes you bring that guy in because your culture's strong enough around him.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you're bringing in 5, 6, 7, 8 guys like that, that's when you can get into trouble.
Yeah, agreed. Seen it too many times. Seen it too many times on all levels, and you can't do that. You just can't do that. The final topic that we want to touch on, Brian, which I thought was a very interesting topic, because we are about 5 months removed from the national championship game, and the question that was asked was, if you go back to that night, the national championship, Atlanta, what are your thoughts? And basically Marcus Freeman was like, I'm still pissed. Like,
yeah.
I mean, for lack of a better term, that's not his exact words. But
I'll give you his exact words.
Yeah, go ahead.
First question, pain.
Pain.
Pauses.
Right.
Devastation. Somebody says still? He goes, oh, yeah. When I think back to the season, it is totally different. This is what he said. When I think back to the season, it is totally different. When I think back to that game and that night, painful, disappointing, underachieved. Those are the things I think about. I wish we could go back and just do it one more time. We didn't play our best when our best was needed. The outcome is the outcome, but that's different than when I think about the entire season. To think about the journey is completely different. That is a selfish answer. That is what I feel. Grateful for the seniors, grateful for guys that was their last game, appreciative of the guys and their sacrifices. Selfishly, that is how I feel about that game. and it fit exactly into what some intel that I've put on the board before. And I don't know if I've said this in the show, but I've put it on the message board before, where I've been told by people like Marcus Freeman is not. I've been told by several people that Marcus Freeman's been very cranky this offseason, like very cranky. And they're like, well, what do you mean by that? It's like he's still real pissed about that game, and everything they do is fueled by that. And like, you ask, are they going to be able to be hungry? From what I'm told, like now he's been very, like what he said there is exactly how he is. We've always said Marcus Freeman tends to be a pretty open book. Mm-hmm. And what he said was exactly how I've been told he's been acting, which is when they talk about the season, it's still very much what a great ride. I mean, every coach loves their vets, right?
Of course.
But I think with Marcus Freeman, because of a lot of the leadership are guys that he coached as a coordinator. And he coached Riley Mills as a coordinator. He was the guy that played a big role in bringing Xavier Watts over to defense in the first place. And so it's a different type of relationship maybe with those guys, where like Drake Bowen has only ever been a head coach linebacker relationship. Now he recruited Drake, but like as far as it got there. And I think that relationship was a little bit different. And there's a appreciation for that group and the season as a whole. But for him, it's like we got here, and the reason we lost is because we didn't play Notre Dame football. We didn't play to the level we're capable of, and that's really sat in his craw, which is a very different reaction to the last couple times they got on the stage where they got blown out. And it was just kind of like, well, hey, look, man, we're not on that team's level. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. Now it's more like we're better than that. That's not who we are. Would the result have been different? I don't know. For all we know, Notre Dame would have taken a late lead, and Ohio State would have gone down the field and scored a touchdown to win it again. That was two great football teams. But the point is, we don't know that because we didn't give you our best effort, at least for the first, for that like great start, crappy into the first quarter, second quarter, bad start to the third quarter, and then dominated the rest of the way. You're not going to win games like that. And it was a very interesting. I mean, and you could just see, like, it wasn't even just like, pain and devastation. It was like, pause for a second and just like pain. And he pauses, devastation. And then they're like, still? And he's like, oh yeah. I mean, it's one thing to see the words and hear me read it, but like you guys needed to see his body language. It was just like,
it's festering.
It's still boiling. It's not even like like I've said this before, like, when I have a tendency where I'm kind of like always simmering, and it sometimes doesn't take a lot to get me to just immediately go into boil. Like, if you got water that's simmering and you turn up the temperature, it immediately goes to a boil. Like with Marcus Freeman, it's like, no, it's boiling. It's still boiling. It's not simmering. It's still very much there and driving. I mean, we're almost to June. We're 4 months past that. They've had spring ball, signing day, the draft, graduation, and he's still pissed about that game. So if you're wondering, like, is this team going to stay hungry? I don't know, but I know the head football coach is. I didn't get a sense of, hey, I'm the newest celebrity head coach. Everybody loves me now. Look at me. I mean, he actually has done less stuff this offseason media-wise from what I've seen than what he did last offseason. And I was told by somebody he doesn't really want to do that stuff. He said that during the thing, he's like, I've done more self-scouting this summer than I did last summer. Why? You just had a great season because you got that taste. And now it's like, it's like Vince, you grow up and, we were both middle class-ish guys, and I've been in some tough times in my life. And, you're like, what I'm not getting a filet for dinner when mom's making steak. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm getting the parts that maybe they're not serving at a restaurant. It's like, it's a good flavor. And then that first time, your 16th birthday or whatever, mom takes you out to the really nice steakhouse and you get like a filet, and it just like melts in your mouth. And you're like, oh my God, what do you want to go back to the ground steak the next day? No, I want more filet. So what do I got to do? I got to make more money because that costs $60. Cool. I'm going to go work. I'm going to do this. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a rough analogy, but you get the point, right? Like you get that taste in your mouth. Like I've seen this thing on Twitter where it's these pictures of babies the first time they try like a food. And then just like the one kid like takes ice cream. He's like, it's like you get that taste. You want more of it. And that's kind of where Marcus Freeman is. It's like, look, we were so far away from being a championship team a year ago. Like I'm going to talk to Jim Harbaugh and I'm going to talk to a guy on a battleship, or was it a carrier?
Something like that. Yeah.
And I'm doing this because like, how do we get to that? Like now it's like we're at that level. What did we do that kept us from maybe being better? And he talked about that. He talked at another time. He's talking about how like, we got some pretty good opponents starting the season off with. And how do we do better of playing better earlier in the season? Like that's what we're looking into from a self-scouting standpoint is kind of that kind of thing. So you could see that there's a taste, right? And it's like, dude, I want to get back to that. Like now that I've had that, I can't ever go back to ground steak again. Like I've now had this filet from this world-class restaurant and chef. I can't go back over to ground steak. It's just not, it's like, no thanks. I'm good. I'll have a bologna sandwich. It just, you get spoiled of it. And you can either do it like, take it for granted, or you can say, I want that. I want it again. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get it again. And that's the sense that I got from Marcus Freeman. I've been told that by people. But when you see it, again, I've told you that I've been told that by Vince. So when he had that reaction, like that very visceral, just, he was up eating, talking, and then just as soon as he asked a question, just like got in his feelings a little bit and was just like, and you're just like, dude, I love that. Like, okay, he's still pissed about that. That's still grinding him. He's waking up in cold sweats at 2:00 in the morning thinking, God, I can't believe we lost that freaking football game. Like that. That's kind of what you want to be, as opposed to the guy that's like, we just, we play a little harder and coach a little better and not make any changes. We're going to be okay.
I don't know who that is you're referring to. I have no idea.
Yes.
But listen, this is what, in all seriousness, this is what you need as a leader, though, because, and I'm not saying Notre Dame guys, I'm saying in general, when you come off of a national championship or a championship experience, like Notre Dame did, there's going to be some complacency if you allow it. And Marcus Freeman is not going to allow any complacency based on the attitude. Not that I thought that he would, but based on the attitude that we saw today and the disposition that he has when talking about that game, he is going to remind this team of who they can be, where they were, and where they need to get to on a daily basis. They're not going to sit in that success and just be like, you know what? We made it, man. Like we're one of the two best teams in the country, and that's cool. We're good, and we can sit in that, and we'll be fine, and we'll just do what we did last year, and it'll be great. No, they're ticked. Like, as a group, they're ticked, and when we talk about taking on the personality of your head coach and all of that and being a leader and the culture and all of that, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about who Marcus Freeman is. They're going to take on his personality. And if he's ticked off,
yeah,
I hate to see what Notre Dame's football team looks like ticked off with a chip on their shoulder.
It makes me think of the expression that every husband has heard at one point in time. If she ain't happy, you ain't happy.
Bingo.
Hey, man, same way with football. If the head coach ain't happy, you ain't happy.
Correct.
I don't care what your mood was coming into practice, but if coach is pissed off, it's going to be one of them days. I was having a good day. Not now. Coach is he's on one today.
Right.
And you always knew it, right, Vince? Is you'd go to probably, What a lot of people don't know is like the great coaches, that's planned. Like it's not, it's not like Lou Holtz didn't act the way he acted in weeks of Navy game when Navy was terrible back in the day. Just because he was in his feelings those weeks. It was intentional. There was a purpose behind it. But like in this regard, it's like, it's not, it's just like, this is one of those things where it's just, he feels it. Now you've got to also make sure that it doesn't bleed into how, you're just not yelling at your players all the time and crushing your players. Like, this is why we lost the dang championship game, you idiot. You're like, you're not doing that. And that's not what we've seen. It's more about just like, it drives. Why am I getting up in the morning every morning? Why am I putting in the extra work? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing
your motivation?
Why am I telling my boys I'm not going to the beach today because I got to put this work in first? Like it's those things that fuel you, and that's what leads to, you kind of making that jump as a program. Is like you're like Ohio State. I mean, why did a lot of those kids from Ohio State come back? They'd all said. I mean, look, the NIL convinced them to come back, but what was the motivation behind it? We should have been a better team last year. Like we were a team that we should have played for a championship. We felt we were better than what we showed, and things didn't go the way that they were supposed to go, and so they came back with a hunger. You think back to the 1988 season. When does Lou Holtz said like he comes in the locker room after the Cotton Bowl and they got their butts whooped in the Cotton Bowl, and he sees this kid who's sobbing over in the corner who didn't even play, and is like, okay, this is our motivation. Like, we're not going to let this happen again. And that offseason was rough. Players talk about it, but it was intentionally rough because I want to find out who the guys I can really go to battle with are. And if you can make it through that, then we can make it through that season, and that team goes out the next year and wins a title. But it wasn't just like, well, it's unfortunate we lost our last 3 games, but look, we'll just play a little harder and coach a little better and work a little bit harder in the offseason, and we'll be fine. That's not how Dabo felt after 2015. I can assure you that. That's not how Nick Saban felt in 2008 when they got smacked by Florida in the SEC title game. I promise you that. It's not how a lot of different coaches, man. You can go back over the time and just kind of point to those games where you're like, that moment we did not want to feel that way again. You look at Texas back in 2004, that loss to Oklahoma. Oklahoma just been dominating them. It fueled them that offseason. Say we're never going to have that happen again. We just don't want to feel that way. We're too good to miss out. And then that next year, they go out and play Oklahoma, and they just destroyed them in 2005, and that fueled that team to go on and win a championship. You can always point to things like that. People talking this year about the loss to Michigan and what it did for Ohio State. That just completely reset their focus. And from what I've heard and to see Marcus Freeman reacting to that today, it very much sounds like that they're having that reaction as well with Notre Dame, which hopefully that continues, and it answers the question of, can this because you're going to go one of two ways. You're either going to be more hungry because you got that taste, or you're going to become stagnant. And
we've seen it go both ways.
Go backwards.
Yeah, we've seen it go both ways. You know what I mean? Like teams that make it to the Super Bowl and then are unsuccessful, the next year and don't even make the playoff. You know what I mean? So like we've seen it go both ways, and it can go both ways. There's no doubt about it. The
year that old BK had that whole we just got to play a little better and coach a little harder stuff, that next year they went 4-8.
Correct. Right. Absolutely. So Brian, that was our sit down with Marcus Freeman. Those are the highlights, and there's going to be some written content, I'm sure, that comes out of this as well. Moving forward on irishbreakdown.com. So you're going to want to check that out too. But those are the highlights that we kind of wanted to bring to you guys and kind of let you know what that was like. It was a lot of fun. So I'm very thankful that we had that opportunity to sit down with Marcus Freeman, late in May, when, the college football world is on a little bit of a hiatus outside of the fact a team doesn't want to play Notre Dame anymore. So it was good to have that conversation, have that sit down, and we were able to see a lot of different things. Yeah, just a little soft. So appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We still have the mailbag that is upcoming, but of course, before you head out, don't head out, first of all. But make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And, of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. There's probably going to be some more information over there as well that came from our little sit down and our discussion with Marcus Freeman. But there's always intel over there. Recruiting is obviously still doing its thing. Irish Invasion's coming up, all of those different things. So you're going to want to stay locked in at boards.irishbreakdown.com. It's the best thing money can buy. I'm not going to lie to you. So you want to make sure that you head on over there and check it out. You can see it scrolling along the bottom right there, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Come along for the fun. Join the family. We'd love to have you. All right, Brian, it is that time of day. We've got a lot of questions in the queue. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but we're going to do our darndest. But
pretty sure we won't, but we will. We'll go
throwing it out there. Yeah. So we're going to
have left in my voice, but I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it
fair.
my best.
I will try to pick you up, my friend, because that's what we do. But we're gonna hit a little bit of a mailbag again. If you want to get a question in, you put the little mailbag symbol, the little mailbox, or you put MB at the front. That way we can see it and we can tag it up and hopefully answer it. Obviously, if you want your question bumped to the front, throw us a super chat, and then we'll make that happen. We'll make sure your question gets read, but we will do our best to answer as many questions as we possibly can, Brian. So without further ado, Aiden Benami with the first question. It says, will June and July be our two biggest recruiting months? 5 to 7 commits or so?
Biggest no. Notre Dame got 9 commitments in April and May. You had Ebenezer Iwatade, Rodney Dunham, Gregory Patrick, Bubba Fraser, Aiden Pouncey, Jacoby Clapper, Javian Osborne, Tiki Ola, and Jonas Walton. Now, when you look at where Notre Dame is right now, they're at 16 commitments. I think 25 is kind of the ideal number, period. So if you get to 25, you're only getting 9. And I don't know that everyone's going to commit in those 2 months, but it'll 5 to 7 part. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the ideal number for June and July, is to at least get 5 or 7, but that won't be their biggest period, because I think April and May was huge. And there's a couple guys that were originally planning on committing in June and July that decided a little bit sooner because
they pushed it up. Yeah, that's like, well, we know where we're going, so we might as well just make that commitment. So, yeah, summer's a little bit different nowadays, which is kind of wild. Things are getting done a little bit earlier. Just like recruiting, man, I just feel like the calendar just keeps moving up and up and up and up and up. But, here we are. From Adam Garcia, do you think Notre Dame will win a national championship within the next 5 years? And what do you think the biggest change will be to allow this to happen?
Well, to begin, yes. I said during last summer that I believe Notre Dame's going to win a championship within the next 3 years. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that last year that team was really good. We thought it could be. We had some things had to go right, and there were some. I'd say there's more questions about the talent at certain spots last year than there is this year. This year, it's more about experience in certain key spots. But I saw nothing. I mean, if I thought they were going to win a title within 3 years before last season, then making it to the title game and being a 3rd and 11 stop away in the fourth quarter from having a chance to tie it is not going to make me be like, well, had their shot. And I'm not saying that you're saying that. I'm just like, I'm not going to back off of that. And I feel more confident, more convicted in that statement now. And the biggest change has already happened. It was Marcus Freeman getting hired and being someone capable and willing to put in the work to improve the talent level everywhere, on coaching staff wise, player wise, back office wise. And when I say coaching wise, Brian Kelly had some great coaches on his staff. And Harry Heastan, he's hired Mike Mickens, he hired Marcus Freeman. But there's always like 2 coaches or 3 coaches that would just were so bad they kind of drug everybody else down. Charlie Molnar, Brian Van Gorder, Jeff Quinn. And like this staff doesn't have that. I mean, if the biggest beef we have is Joe Rudolph good enough or not, like you're in a pretty good place coaching staff wise. If Jeff Rudolph or Joe Rudolph, is your biggest potential question mark on your staff, you're in a much better place from a coaching standpoint than you were before. And so like it's the talent level on the team. It's they've expanded the back office, which is partly, Pete Bavak was doing. Jack Swarbrick started to kind of come along on that. The new administration has certainly done that. Notre Dame's got more money coming in now than they did before because of, some of the new deals they've gotten and things like that, but also the need for those things. So you're getting more, money given to the program from outside. There's all those things that are happening, but it's honestly, Adam, it's keep doing what you're doing. Just keep doing keep bringing in recruiting classes like you did in 23 and 24 and 25. Just keep doing that. And that's it. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep getting it in, and then also keep having that drive to be better, be better, be better, be better. As long as they do that, then I stand by what I said a year ago, which is I think Notre Dame wins a title within the next 3 years.
Yep. The trend is in the right direction for sure. No doubt about that. No doubt about that.
Vince, is there something Star Wars related happening today or something like that? Because we had like multiple Star Wars questions.
Really? The only Star Wars thing I know of May is like May 4th, and we are far away from that. So I have no idea. But IC05 says, what is your favorite Star Wars movie? Or if you're a Star Wars fan at all, the new Andor series is amazing, and I recommend it to anyone who is a fan of Star Wars.
Well, I don't really have a favorite Star Wars movie because it's like the Lord of the Rings. They all kind of go together. They're telling one story. It's like the thing I love about the original Star Wars is it's 3 movies. It's basically like one movie that they broke up into 3 segments. And so like they all kind of go together. But yeah, but I probably say I don't know. I mean, the first one was kind of, just setting the stage for it, but the third one was a little bit dark. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if I can. I'll say this: the original 3 are blow away anything that's come since then, with all due respect. But I'd probably say Empire Strikes Back. If I had to pick one, it's probably my favorite. But Return of the Jedi's close second. The first one I liked a lot too, and there's the aspect of it setting the stage for the storyline, but it's kind of like Lord of the Rings. Like, man, I loved the first Lord of the Rings, but then the second was even better, and then the third one was even better than that. It's just, I kind of felt that a little bit about the Star Wars also. The third one I thought had a couple weird turns that I didn't like as much, but overall it was brilliant. And then there was another question. Tristan Shoup said, if you could have a lightsaber, what color would you choose? Well, I like the good guys.
I don't remember who's
blue or green.
Is blue and green the good one? Green, red is the bad, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. As far as the other question is concerned, I've watched all of the movies, like the 9 movies, all the spin-off like TV shows and stuff. I just can't keep it all straight. What happens before? What happens after?
Yeah.
Is it a prequel? Is it a sequel? Is it like the same time? Like, I just can't keep it all straight. And so I haven't watched a lot of
new ones, the new movies I thought had hope. Like I liked the first one of the new with like Ray and all, but then they just got dumber and dumber. The second and third, like they got progressively worse.
Yeah, and that's fair. Yeah. I watched them all.
I did like Rogue One. That was good. I haven't seen Solo. I didn't watch Mandalorian. Like you said, it's like I haven't watched the new one that's out.
Andor series or whatever.
No, not the other one. Is it Ox? Oh man, goodness gracious. But the one with what's her name? Dawson. Last name's Dawson. But anyway, I haven't seen a lot of those, but yeah, if I'd be a Jedi. If I could be one, and I would want to be a Jedi, a good Jedi.
Fair. That's
not
fair.
Not a Jedi that turned like Anakin. So I was like, is something happen with Star Wars? Like that we're getting these questions. So,
you got me. I guess I'm more out of the loop than I thought. I mean, I like watching the movies. They're very entertaining to me. But like I said, it's like a full-time job to keep track of all of the different like arms of the universe and stuff like that. And like, I don't mean universe as in the star system. I mean universe of like the Star Wars universe. You know what I mean?
I think Star Wars and Marvel went through the same thing. As number one, there were some agendas that were built in that weren't actually about the movie and the storylines. They were trying to get other agendas across and using the movie to do it, which was lame. But then it was just like, you're putting too much out. Like when the Marvel stuff, it was like, okay, first you had Iron Man, then you had, Captain America. And it's like, now it's like, you got a movie coming out, you got this TV series coming out, and then that's Father's. And it's just like, good Lord, guys. I mean, like we do have jobs. Yeah. I mean, goodness gracious. I do have a life other than watching Marvel movies. So yeah.
But it's your fault that I sat down and watched every single Marvel's movie like in chronological order.
Awesome.
It was. But like I did them all.
Didn't we go see Endgame together?
Yeah.
Isn't that why?
I think so. I can't remember exactly how it all went down.
I told you had to watch. We had to watch.
I ended up watching every single Marvel's movie in like the universe's chronological order. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, it was.
Because it started with like Captain America, right? Yes, and then it's Captain Marvel, and then because like it's not chronological of when the movies came out, but the storyline, which
like along the timeline.
Captain America is the original of that. So.
Which, by the way, my favorite of all of them is the Captain America. The first
Captain America in the The first Iron Man I liked a lot as well.
Fair.
But the Avengers movies were always the best when you had all of them together.
Fair enough. But yeah, Captain America, I don't know. He's my favorite.
Captain America's quote unquote solo movies weren't really solo movies after the first one. Because it was, Captain America, it was the Civil War and Winter Soldier. There was always more people involved. Where like with the Iron Mans, it was just kind of like Iron Man and then the Black Widow, the first two Iron, you know what I mean?
Well, and I don't
obviously, but it wasn't like all the others.
And I will never claim to be an expert on the Marvel universe and all of those different things. But from a selfish standpoint, when the original Captain America was no longer playing Captain America, it was like, I stopped caring. I think I'm done. Like that's kind of where I was. And it has nothing to do with the new actor or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It was just, I like the original Captain America. Why did they have, and maybe that's the way it went in the comic books. And so they had to follow it. Okay. I just
would agree it is, yeah.
It's like, dang it, man.
It's like with the Green Lantern, there was different it was Hal Jordan, and there was different Green Lanterns.
It's like, why did they have to retire the original Captain America? Like that was depressing.
They killed the Golden Goose a little bit sooner than they should have. And it's like now they're trying to bring back Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom. It's like, I have no desire to watch these.
Really? Okay.
We'll see. Trevor did say that the new Thunderbolts was really good because he and I have a very similar view of how lame Marvel got.
Okay.
He went and saw Thunderbolts and he was like, it was really good.
Okay. I've heard that they kind of rebounded with that one, but
we'll see.
We'll see. I
wonder if they actually rebounded or just the others were so bad
that this one it looks like it's good. Yeah, right. Aiden Benami, another mailbag question. Week 7, Michigan at that school in Southern California. Thoughts if both are undefeated? We want USC, but woo, what a horrible game. Cheaters versus cowards.
I know, right? I'm very curious how that game's going to go.
In general, who would you root for? Not specifically to
USC.
Yeah, me too.
See, I don't view Michigan as the same kind of rival that USC is, but I've said this before. Agreed. I don't hate USC like I hate Michigan. I don't care about playing Michigan. I don't.
Me neither.
I'd rather play Michigan State. I'd rather play Miami. I'd rather play Clemson. I'd rather play USC. I'd rather play Alabama, Texas. I hate Michigan. I don't even want to give them the opportunity to get a win where they might be able to say something or even have the right to play inside Notre Dame Stadium. I just despise everything about that program. I don't feel that way about USC until recently, and that's more so a disdain for Lincoln Riley than it is for USC.
I have always had respect for the USC rivalry and the USC people. And I've told this story before. My cousin went to USC, and there was a year where she's originally from Chicago, went out to USC to go to school. So we've had a fun rivalry within the family. But one year after she was graduated, I drove to Chicago, and they have a huge USC pep rally at Navy Pier either the night before or 2 nights before, the home game for Notre Dame when they play USC. And so I went, and of course I decked out in Notre Dame gear, and I am absolutely surrounded by USC fans. They were all really nice. It was a very respectful situation. We had great conversations with people. That has never, ever been the case when I've been surrounded by Michigan people. I'm sorry. USC people are nice, at least the ones I've run into. It's a respectful rivalry. And that's why I think there's so many USC people that are saying we need to keep this rivalry because it is a respectful rivalry. But I will always root against them, except when they play Michigan. I will never root for Michigan. There's no way that will ever happen.
I agree. Well, and then the other part is just the fact that Notre Dame doesn't play USC right afterwards. If USC wins and they are undefeated, and then they're going to be ranked, and that's a better win for Notre Dame. Michigan winning does nothing for that.
Tyler Evans with a super chat. Appreciate the super chat. Says SEC leaving the NCAA ? I believe that was a false rumor that was thrown out on social media.
It wasn't a false rumor. It's just the fact that some people are so starved for information. They just see something and just run with it like it's true.
Correct.
It would have taken you literally not Tyler, because he's probably hearing it from someone who heard it. It'd have taken you 10 seconds at the most to click on the person who said that and realize this is a troll account. This is not a real account. And now, did Greg Sankey say something like he's got people asking him, why are they in the NCAA? Yes, he said that. but that's more of them just kind of badgering. The SEC will not, and it's not even that. It's not about leaving the SEC or NCAA. It's about football separating. So even if football separates, the schools will most likely still keep everything else associated with the NCAA, even if that happens. But no, I don't see that happening. I think everybody will leave together.
Yeah, I agree.
If the SEC goes out and leaves on their own, okay, well,
they're going to be twisted to win by themselves.
Right?
Yeah, like I still contend with the fact that at this point in the way college football has become and what has happened, amongst the college football world, I still think at the end of the day, and this is probably down the line a little bit, that the major conferences in college football just need to do their own thing and then allow the rest of the sports in the NCAA to just go back to regional conferences and go back to normalcy and just let football do their own thing, because football has ballooned into its own thing. And that's what I would like to see. I want normalcy back with the conferences, and then football can do whatever they're going to do, and we can just move about our lives. Like, that's personally how I feel. But this particular situation is not happening yet. And I agree with you. It'd have to be everybody making that move at the same time.
Coach Bent said something in response to our USC-Michigan conversation. He said the response by a lot of USC fans toward Lincoln Riley shows why I was always root for them against Michigan. And that is spot on. Michigan fans, by and large, will say whatever, do whatever to defend their program. And they may, and I don't even know if they really I think they're just so brainwashed and so cultish that they'll just, whatever the leader says, we follow. Whereas USC fans, I mean, every fan base has those. Notre Dame fan, there's that kind of person in the Notre Dame fan base. And I knew those people very well during the Brian Kelly era because I didn't follow what the great leader said. But there's much more of that in the Michigan fan base. Like, that's the vast majority. There's always the cult members of USC, but there's a lot of USC fans and alums and donors that are not a big fan of Lincoln Riley. And not just because he's not winning, but because they're like, he doesn't understand and appreciate what makes USC USC. That was my biggest complaint with Brian Kelly. He doesn't appreciate what makes Notre Dame unique. I could have seen Brian Kelly trying to drop USC at one point in time. I could have seen him maybe if like USC was doing to them what they did to Charlie Weiss and Ty Willingham and Bob Davie. He absolutely would have tried to get out of it. But I agree, Coach. It's a great answer. Great comment, I should say.
Tommy Guns, he says, mailbag question, who will lead the offense in plays of 20-plus yards? And then also team total over-under set at 65.5.
65.5 is
that a big number? Because I don't know.
I mean, they were at 65 last year. Would disappoint me if they were underneath that this year, Tommy.
Okay.
Because the thing last year is they were at 65, so they ranked 38th in all of college football last year in plays of 20 yards or more. But in the run game, they were 8th with 29. So they only had what to be 36 in the pass game. And that's what killed them, is because they were in the top 10 in rushing, but then they were bought in 84th in receiving.
Oof.
So I don't see any reason why they'll drop down at all in rushing this year. The expectation is that we'll see more big plays in the pass game. So I would hope so. Who will lead the team in plays of 20 yards or more? I hope that it's a wide receiver. I hope it's Jaden Greathouse or Malachi Fields. There's a chance it could be Jeremiah Love. Certainly could be Jeremiah Love because he may get some of those pass game opportunities as well. But if I had to guess, I'd go with either Jeremiah Love or Malachi Fields. And the reason I go Malachi Fields is because there's more opportunities for big plays in the pass game than the run game. I mean, if you look at just in most seasons, I just kind of always feel like you're throwing the ball a lot more than you are running the ball. So now the further you get, the more opportunities there are. But like last year, the team that led the nation in longest rush plays of over 20 yards is UNLV with 36. If you only had 36 20-yard gains in the pass game, you would rank where Notre Dame was at 84th. So think about that. Notre Dame had 36 pass plays of 20 yards or more. If they had that same number in the run game, they would have led the nation. So it's just there's more opportunities in the pass game to do that. So that's why I'd lean towards a Malachi Fields or a Jaden Greathouse type of player. But Love could maybe get 6 or 7 in the pass game too, and maybe that helps him be in that standpoint.
Tommy with another mailbag question. Love runs for at least 25 yards or more than 9.5 times. And that's a question. Does he? Yeah. He's setting the over-under at 9.5. He had 7 such runs last season. Tommy's getting deep into the stats today.
Well, I think he's misguided on that. So if I'm correct, I believe that because he had Jadarian Price is having 4. And so what he's doing is he's looking at the longest runs. And so he's basically going off of that. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So real quick, he had 8 touchdown runs of 20 yards or more. So he had a 29-yard touchdown, or he had a 29-yard gain against Texas A&M. He had a 34-yard touchdown run against Northern Illinois, 48-yard against Purdue. He had a 39-yard touchdown against Stanford, 64-yard touchdown against Navy, 76-yard touchdown against Virginia, 68-yard touchdown against Army, and then a 98-yard touchdown against Indiana. So that's 8 right there. And then he also had a 21-yard touchdown run against A&M, so that's 9. So and I believe there were other games where he had more than one gain of 20 yards or more. So definitely over. Oh, I guess he said 25 yards or more. So, but that's still 8.
Still going to be over.
The touchdown run was 21, but I'd still go over on that. And then he had a similar question about Jadarian Price as well.
Okay.
And same thing. I take the over on that one as well.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, because I think those guys are going to get more touches this year than they did last year. So I like the chances. And an offensive line is arguably better, not even arguably, has the potential to be better this year than it was last year. So I will take the over on both of those as well. Adam Garcia with the mailbag question. What do you guys think this 24 team would have looked like under BK and Brian Van Gorder?
Well, I promise you this, they wouldn't have ended the season with a loss.
Well, they might have.
No, they wouldn't have.
Because they wouldn't have gone
to a bowl. Smoked whoever they played in the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
That is a strong guarantee on your part, and I'm not sure if I'm there with you.
I'm just saying, man.
I don't know that they win the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Just saying. Hey, I mean, Van Gorder and Kelly combined together to beat LSU in the Music City Bowl.
I realize there are a lot of factors that can go into this particular question, but there's also like this team wouldn't look like it did in 24. But the premise of the question is you're going to get this roster and you're going to put those guys in charge of it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because like Riley Leonard doesn't come to Notre Dame. Like there's so many different things that don't happen. But I understand the premise of the question, and it would not have looked good, Adam. We would all have been very disappointed of an underachieving team.
I think they beat Iowa State in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. That's just my 2 cents.
They already beat Iowa State in the same exact bowl. It was just a different name, I believe, at the time, right?
Yep.
So, and we would just had more. We would have had Pop-Tarts gear.
That would have made me very happy.
I
want to cover the Cheez-Its Bowl one of these days. But like in all seriousness, to my answer, they would not have been a playoff team. They don't beat Texas A&M.
No,
I don't think they beat Louisville. I don't think they beat USC at the end of the year. And
not with the way that game went, because I mean they don't hold up at the end of that game because they certainly aren't going to have 2 pick sixes at the end of the game.
Yeah,
no chance.
And Notre Dame didn't exactly have great success against the Navy offense when Brian Van Gorder was your defensive coordinator. If you remember correctly, Vince, remember they jumped up on Navy in 2014 big. I'm looking up the final scores, 49-39. They were up big, and then Van Gorder had like no answers in the second half, and they just ran all over them. And then, of course, in 2016, they let Navy go on he had been fired by that point in time, but they'd kind of ruined him. But they beat Navy 41-24 the year before, gave up over 20 points again. And then in 2016, they got beat by Navy again. So, yeah.
I got to throw this up here. Carlos says, BK beats NIU, though, if that makes you feel better.
Yeah.
He would have.
Yeah, they would have definitely won that game. 100%.
I agree with
100%,
that.
Carlos. There's no doubt. I love that response, though, bud. That's
fantastic.
awesome. That's a great response.
That's awesome.
Great response, Carlos. But yes, they would have absolutely beat Northern Illinois. But I'll take that trade-off, the loss of Northern Illinois from all those other wins. That is a great comment, Carlos. I love that. That's freaking
awesome.
great.
That was awesome.
That's great. It doesn't make me feel better because I will take those other wins. But yeah.
But when you're right, you're right.
Yeah. That's funny. Shaquille O'Neal. Brian, what are you talking about? Notre Dame's defense would have fist pumped their way through the schedule. That's great. That's great. That's great. I love that. Love that. Oh, my goodness. Let's go to this one right here.
All right. ICURN with Irish Luck. What's going on? Long time no see since I haven't been on the afternoon show in a while. Brian, what Notre Dame player would you have put in the top 100? Greathouse, Fields, Love, Price, Moore, Bowen.
Yes.
All fair. Yeah.
I think they're all top 100 football players. I mean, look, because anytime you're doing a ranking like this, there's projection on what you expect guys to be.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, I think you could argue that Malachi Fields was a top 100 caliber player last year. Man, 50 catches for 100 yards and 5 touchdowns with a terrible quarterback. And they didn't play in the bowl game. And, I mean, Love was last year. Moore was last year. You project – I mean, you could argue Jadarian Price is at least in the conversation. I'd put all – the only guy that I'd maybe a question mark would be Price. But I think you could – I mean, whoever you think Notre Dame's best offensive lineman is – I think Emil Wagner for how he played last year. But if I'm projecting forward, I'm not afraid to have Charles Jagusah on there. I just would need to, I'd have to think through that one. But if we're projecting, I mean, the top 100 from On 3 had, I think, Bryce Underwood in it and had several freshmen who didn't do a whole lot last year. But, I mean, I think at least those 5 guys, I feel very good about putting Drake Bowen in there. I think he absolutely should be in there. ESPN had him in their ranking of the 25 best non-quarterbacks. And the thing I liked about that article, Vince, is it wasn't necessarily their opinion. That was basically they went out and got feedback from coaches around the country. That's how they came to their list.
Gotcha.
And, I think that list will be at least 5 of those 6. Price is the one I'd have to kind of like go back and actually look at it. He'd be in that 90 to 110 range. Maybe he's slightly inside, maybe slightly outside of it, but he'd be in the conversation. But Greathouse, Fields, Love, Moore, Bowen, probably Emil Wagner, Billy Schrauth, if you're talking about projection, Jagusah, Anthony Knapp,
Kingston?
Yeah, possibly. But the reason I would leave Kingston off is because we don't know he's even going to start this year yet. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, but could he get there? Of course.
Yeah.
But, like you could honestly pick any offensive lineman, not name Ashton Craig and say, hey, look, I think this guy's going to have a breakout season. So I wouldn't put all those guys in the top 10,
but they're all in the discussion.
They're all in the conversation.
Yeah.
And I'd say whoever of those linemen you think is going to have the best season, I would then say that's probably a top 100 player.
Coach Bent 574 with the mailbag question. How do you feel about the College Football Hall of Fame lowering the winning percentage needed to 595, all but assuring Mike Leach will get in?
I honestly don't think there should be a winning percentage criteria.
I think that was even a thing. I had no idea that was a thing. And that winning percentage can be very deceiving, though, too.
Yeah.
I don't like that being a benchmark in the first place.
I mean, do you like Lou Samochi pointed this out to me one time? He goes, "Do you know what Eric Parsegian's winning what his record was? Like his win percentage was at Northwestern, where he coached before he came to Notre Dame? He was basically a 500 coach." I was like, "No, he wasn't. Yeah, he was 36, 35, and 1 at Northwestern.
Pretty much 500 right there.
Yeah, but why?" And the point Lou made was what people don't understand is going 500 at Northwestern was a phenomenal coaching job, which is why he got the Notre Dame job and won. And so people recognize that. So, like, like Mike Gundy is not going to have the win percentage that maybe another big name coach, Bob Stoops had. But you look and say, but he did that at Oklahoma State, man. Like that's a hard thing to do. And so and then some coaches they love taking over reclamation projects, and saying, hey, I took over this team, so we're going to maybe have some bad records our first couple of years. We're going to get that sucker turned around. I think greatness is not defined by a win. And I've seen coaches who had win percentages over 600 that have no business even being brought up in an all-time, conversation. So, I'm going to actually pull something up. I want to see some of this, but there's some coaches who won national championships, coaches who won, a lot of games because they inherited a great situation or whatever the case may be. But, I don't think there should be that on there. That's just my 2 cents. So, hey, I didn't know one of my former bosses, as I'm looking at this list, is on there. Joe Fincham had an over 800 win percentage. It's impressive. But yeah, I mean,
is that in all of college football, or is that okay?
Football,
it's all levels.
Yep. So it's got D3 coaches in there, D2 coaches in there, stuff like that. So
gotcha.
I'm just trying to find an example of a guy who's in that conversation that was not a very good coach.
Oh, I see.
I'm not there yet, but I'm pretty sure that what's his face? Let me pull him up. Let's go right to him. Larry Coker had a pretty good win percentage in his career. I could be wrong on that though, but he had a pretty good track record at old Miami at least. So he went 16-15 and won a title at Miami, but was he a good coach? No, he wasn't. So it's kind of why I look at it. I'm actually going to add this up. So just give me a second, because 86 divided by 133. Yeah, Larry Coker has a 647 win percentage. That's way over the threshold for college football.
Right, and nobody would say that he's a better coach than Mike Leach. I'm sorry.
Not even the same universe.
If that's who we're talking about. Right. You know what I mean?
Not in the same universe.
No.
I am not a fan of lowering standards to let somebody in who didn't live up to the standard.
Agreed.
In this case, I'm I don't think that should be the standard.
Correct. What was your impact to the game?
Right. It's it'd be the same as well, you can't be in the Hall of Fame if you weren't a 300 hitter. Well, but that, that guy was great at this thing or that thing or whatever the case may be. It's greatness is greatness. And you have to have enough sense to identify, look, no, his win percentage wasn't as good as so-and-so's, but he did it at Texas Tech and Washington State and, in Mississippi State, and the success he had compared to, this and that is really what it boils down to. And he was, and it's beyond that. He was innovative. I mean, how Mummy kind of started that, but then he took it and made it much better. The way how Mummy has always done it is very gimmicky, and Mike Leach made it he became the coaching tree is. I mean, Lincoln Riley, all these guys. That's a Mike Leach influence of all these coaches, Cliff Kingsbury, all these other guys, and that all came from kind of that tree of Mike Leach. So it's got to be more than just some arbitrary number. That's the key.
No, I absolutely agree.
Yep. Let's get to a couple people we haven't got to today.
All right. Archer 452 rides again. Will Greathouse and Faison be on the field at the same time much if they both play the slot?
Well, if they're both playing the slot, then no. But last year, Faison played outside a bunch. And I expect him to be a Z as well.
Yeah, because of this situation, you wanted those two on the field at the same time. And so they made it work. So that they could be. And I think that will happen again. I mean, you're going to want your three best receivers, whoever that ends up being. And I think right now, if you're putting pencil to paper, right, and you're putting a depth chart together, your three best receivers are Greathouse, Fields, and Faison. Well, you want those three to be on the field at the same time, right? You could obviously do four receivers and some other things. But if you're in your normal set, you're in your base, which is 11 personnel, you want your three best on the field. Those are your best three. They will be on the field at the same time.
Good question, Archer. I want to get to some people that we haven't had a chance to get to yet. And then we'll go back up to
Yeah. Michael Lynch, mailbag question. Thoughts on BK's proposal for all SEC teams to play a Big Ten team in one of their out-of-conference games.
I have no problem with that. I kind of like the idea of the conference crossovers. I wouldn't necessarily like lock it in for perpetuity, but I like that. I've talked about the ACC and Big 12 need to do something like that. I've always felt it should be like on a bit of a rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Like
kind of like baseball does when they do like the AL Central plays the NL East or whatever, like
right.
1 year, and then the next year they play a different
I'd probably do like
division
over a couple years and then rotate it.
I got you. Yeah.
Just go about it that way. I think that'd be a lot of fun, but yeah, it's fine. That's fine. Be good. Now, from what I understand, well, there's a lot of things we'll get into and we'll do some more research, but like the SEC going to 9 conference games is one of the things that the Big Ten commissioners said would have to happen for him to be okay taking a 5+11, 16-team playoff format, meaning 5 automatic qualifiers and then 11 at-larges. There's actually some movement towards that.
God, I hope so.
And but it would require like the Big Ten's like, we're not going to do that. If we're playing 9 conference games and you're playing 8 conference games, we're not going to do that. Where that's kind of silly though is, but you have more teams. So it's more spread out. You need more games for everybody to play everybody, over the course of a period of time. The Big Ten, right now, the SEC only has 16 teams. You have 18. So it's a little bit of a different deal. But that's kind of one of those things. But
I know there's some questions littered in there about the playoff and the format and all that. So I don't want to get too deep into it, but I'll just say good. And look, regardless of who proposed it, I have no problem with it. I would much rather have this proposal than like a USC, for example, basically wanting to drop a Power 4 level team and add a 1AA team, an FCS team. Yeah. Like, cause that's the trend, right? I mean, that's the SEC likes to do that, obviously, in like their week 8 or 9 game, like that. There's that weekend, and I never know what number it is. There's that weekend in like November.
It's the week before rivalry week.
Yeah,
it's they play last week of the season.
The whole conference plays like FCS teams. It's like, what do you do? Like that? That's got to change. That's got to change. I think
they should. I think they should get rid of playing FCS teams altogether.
Yes, completely agree with it. And I get from an FCS standpoint, those are big money games for those teams. Like it helps pay for their program. Like I get all of that, and it's a shame that that's the way everything is structured. But it just doesn't do anything for these Power 4 teams. Like just stop it. Just stop.
I agree. Let's see here real quick. Here's one from Joe Allen I missed.
What is your percentage that CJ is going to be the starter? Joe Allen just coming right at it.
Barring injury, 90. At least 90%.
Yeah, you got to leave a window for this change. But
and this doesn't mean at all that I don't think Kenny Minchie's a heck of a player, but he's just not as good as CJ Carr is. He just isn't.
Yeah,
I don't think he is. I've never seen anything from it. I didn't grade him as such coming out of high school. There's a lot of people in the program that love Kenny Minchie, but there's just something different. And I don't mean love Kenny Minchie like over CJ Carr. I mean, I literally don't know anybody that doesn't think Kenny Minchie is a really good football player.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the other guy's just better. And especially when you consider that CJ's a year younger than Kenny is.
Right.
So, I mean, he's outplayed him in every – like we've seen them play 4 times against each other in a competition setting. We saw the 2 jersey scrimmages and the 2 blue gold games. In the 2 blue gold games, CJ was significantly better. I think it was debatable who was better in the jersey scrimmage this year. And if you take Kenny's pick out of the equation, I would argue Kenny played better than CJ start to finish. CJ finished really strong with that great drive at the end. But, he started off a little bit slow, and Kenny was just, I thought, really good that day, except for that pick. And because it was close, like Kenny was better. The pick made it close.
Sure.
In the blue gold game, CJ was significantly better than what Kenny was. Last year, jersey scrimmage wasn't close. I mean, like CJ was here, and Steve and Kenny were like here. And so, I love Kenny Minchie. I graded him as the top 100 player coming out of high school. I just don't think he's as good as CJ. And People can do whatever they want and hashtag this and hashtag that, but that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
So barring CJ getting hurt and missing time, that would be my percentage. So
yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah, no, I'm okay with that. I was wondering kind of how far you would go, but I agree completely. I mean, I've watched enough to know, and I don't want to use the word unfortunate. Like, it's unfortunate that Kenny Minchie is in the room right now.
It is for him.
It is for him.
If he's here at a different time, if he's here in 2022,
he's a starter.
He's starting. If he's a junior in 2022, he's your starting quarterback. If he's also, if he's a junior in 2022, he's also your quarterback in 2023.
Right.
There's no Sam Hartman. And then he maybe 2024, he comes in as your fifth-year senior. It just so happens that he came here to Notre Dame at a time when they signed probably their best quarterback recruit since Jimmy Clausen.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. Here we go.
From Jim, mailbag question. If BK loses 2 or more SEC games, will he be officially on the hot seat?
It would take more than 2.
Correct.
Unless those 2 are beat downs and they also lose to Clemson. Because, here's the thing. Let's say, looking at their schedule, let's say they lose at Alabama and they lose to, pick one, Vince, either at Ole Miss or at Oklahoma.
Ole Miss.
Okay. So they lose to Ole Miss and they lose to Bama. That means they would still have a win over Florida, a win over South Carolina, a win over Texas A&M, a win over Arkansas, a road win over Oklahoma, a road win over Vanderbilt, and then depending on what they do against Clemson, if they beat Clemson also. So, yeah, you had 2 losses. But think of the big wins they also had mixed in there if they only lose 2 games. Now, you start getting to 3 conference losses and you lose to Clemson out of conference, yeah, it starts to warm up quite a bit. I don't know that they're going to fire him, but I think what it does is that would then get the Jimbo Fisher clock going, meaning Jimbo was done after 22? But they just needed to wait a couple years to fire him to bring down the buyout where they could afford to buy out, kind of thing at Texas A&M. I think it starts that clock. But they'd have to lose more than 2. The only way that 9-3 gets him on the hot seat is if he just gets blown out by Clemson, blown out by Bama, and then blown out by whoever else they win. They lose to. And then they're just kind of ugly wins. I don't see that happening. I don't, I have LSU in my preseason top 15. I think they'll be a good 9-3 football team. Meaning because here's the thing, everybody knows my personal feelings about Brian Kelly as a head football coach, but let's look at this realistically. If LSU goes 9-3 this year, on paper you're another disappointing season, but they got to play at Clemson, at Ole Miss, at Alabama, at Oklahoma, home against Florida, home against South Carolina, home against Texas A&M. So it's not quite as bad as Georgia's schedule was last year, but it's close to where if you go 9-3, yeah, you got 3 losses on there, but that means you had at least 3 really big wins, right? Unless some teams aren't as good as we think they are. Say Florida sucks, South Carolina's overrated, and that kind of thing. But that's how you got to look at it. Is you just can't say 9-3. It's who did they lose to, how did they lose to them, and then who did they beat?
Right.
There's 9-3 seasons that are disappointing. There's 9-3 seasons that are dude, that was a great year. Or in other 9-3 seasons, we're that's a pretty good year. If Georgia would have gone 9-3 last year against that schedule, I'd probably take them over SMU in an at-large bid to the playoff. Bama, I'm not. When you lose to Vanderbilt in Oklahoma,
especially the manner in which you lost to Oklahoma.
If let's say LSU loses by a field goal at Clemson, and let's say they lose in an overtime game to Ole Miss. Ole Miss gets payback. Because remember this year, they beat out Ole Miss in overtime. Ole Miss gets payback, and then they beat Florida. They're 3-1. They lose to Ole Miss. That drops them to 3-2. 2 great games, close games. They're probably still in the top 25. Then they get a bye week. Then they got to play South Carolina at home. Let's say they win that game. And now all of a sudden you're creeping up a little bit. Then you beat Vanderbilt on the road. Then you beat A&M at home. And then you got a bye week. Now all of a sudden you're creeping up. You're now 6-2, and you're creeping up on the top 15. Or if you're not you're probably in the top 15 at that point in time because you've got who you beat. Then you lose at Alabama. That drops you down to 19. You lose by a touchdown late in the game to Bama. You're probably around 20. And then you go out the next week and you got to beat Arkansas, you beat Western Kentucky, and then you go on the road and beat at Oklahoma. You win those 3 games, all of a sudden, you're in that conversation for that final at-large bid in a 12-team playoff.
Now here's the flip side. You lose some of those games, those quote-unquote big games, then the seat starts to heat up a little bit, no doubt, because there's going to be there are opportunities here for LSU and Brian Kelly to win some big games and to kind of not kick the moniker at this point, but hush the crowd a little bit. You win some of those bigger games. You know what I mean? If you continue to operate in big games the way you have in your career, then the seat warms up a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, I completely agree with you.
What is that? Not all records are made the same, Vince.
Absolutely.
Sometimes 9. This is the point I keep making to people about the SEC. Oh, Alabama. But what would Indiana have done with Alabama's schedule? I'm like, probably 10-2. They probably lose to Georgia. They might lose, but I don't think they get beat by Vanderbilt. I don't think they get beat by Oklahoma. This is a really good football team. If it wasn't IU on their helmet and it was Wisconsin or Michigan State, you wouldn't be having the same hissy fit about them getting in. It's not that Bama went 9-3. I've never said a 9-3 team does not belong in the college football playoff because that's a silly blanket statement. I said last summer, if you remember, Vince, we did shows together. I said, look, if Georgia goes 9-3 against the schedule and 3 of the losses are really close, they've got probably still more big wins than anybody else in college football because how crazy their schedule was.
Right.
So it just depends on now what you need, though, is you need South Carolina to be as good as everybody thinks. You need Florida to be as good as everybody thinks. And you need to make sure those teams are good because if you lose to those 3 teams and you're 9-3 still and none of those other teams are any good, well, then now you're out.
Yeah.
It just depends on the context of the schedule.
Yep.
And there's people like Alabama deserved to be in over Indiana. You're only saying that because of the name of the school. You're not making an actual analysis of the quality of those 2 teams last year. You're making a big picture program statement that says you're more focused on what conference you're in than actually evaluating the teams. It's a silly argument to make. I can't believe people are willing to die on the hill of Ole Miss, who lost to 4-8 Kentucky and 8-5 Florida, or Alabama, who lost to 6-6 Oklahoma and 6-6 Vanderbilt, deserve to be in the playoff. That's insanity to me. But the schedule that LSU plays next year, if they have the losses we talk about, and Florida's as good as people think, and South Carolina's as good as people think, and A&M's as good as people think, and Oklahoma's as good as people think, all of a sudden, you got 4 huge wins. Not, hey, we beat Georgia. Well, who else did you beat? What's your next big win? Missouri? Those, however, could potentially be 4 top 15 to 20 wins.
Sure.
So it just the context of who all you play matters. And Alabama and Ole Miss did not have that kind of schedule last year. Georgia did. Florida did. Florida does again this year. Georgia does again this year. LSU does. You might, and that part of it depends on what other leagues do, but you get the point. So I don't think 9-3 gets them on the hot seat. I think 8-4 gets him on the hot seat, or 9-3 with blowout losses.
If he loses all 3 big games, whatever those end up being,
Let's
what I
say
mean?
It's Clemson. Let's just say, based off our preseason rankings,
okay,
let's say that we're correct and we've got every team nailed. They lose to Clemson, they lose to Bama, and they lose to A&M.
So their biggest win is then what? Florida?
Florida. Yep.
South Carolina.
Yep. That's 2 top 20 teams in my ranking.
Sure. No, I get that.
And then,
3 other ones.
Then let's say one team that we're wrong on, one team, either Ole Miss or Oklahoma is better than we think it's going to be. But let's say even if that's the case, it's about how you lose. But what if Ole Miss stinks this year? Or what if Oklahoma sucks again this year?
Stink. That's
right.
Just
they need those teams to be good, and you can't get blown out. That's the key. You just
Right.
can't get blown out.
Right. Agreed. They have to look like a semblance of a team against those losses. Like if they're going to lose, they got to be close losses. If you're going to be 9-3 and have credibility at the end of the season, you can't get blown out in those 3 games. You know what I mean? Like you have to show up and you have to look like a credible team in those games. I'm not saying you're going to be forgiven for those losses, but you can at least have a conversation that you belong in the conversation at the end of the year.
Speaking of that, I think this is a good time to bring up this question from Tommy Guns.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So Tommy has a mailbag question. It says, who you taking in these week 1 matchups based on what we know right now? Game 1, Texas at Ohio State. Game 2 is Bama at Florida State. Game 3, LSU at Clemson. And Game 4, Georgia Tech at Colorado. Well, I'll run through mine gut reaction. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just do it real quick.
Let's do one at a time.
Okay.
Just quickly. We'll both go one at a time. So let's go Texas and Ohio State.
Texas. I'm taking Texas in this one. I know it's at Ohio State. I just think Texas has more coming back than Ohio State. Game 1. I like Texas in this game. Not saying it's going to be a blowout by any stretch of the imagination, especially since it's on the road. But I just think there's a lot of unknowns right now for Ohio. There's more unknowns for Ohio State, in my opinion, than there are for Texas, which is why I'm taking Texas.
I'm torn on this one. I am leaning towards Texas right now. I think Ohio State's going to be a little bit better on defense than maybe some people think because of all the losses that they had. I think they're going to still have a really talented secondary. If Jim Knowles was still their D coordinator, I'd probably take Ohio State. But I don't know a lot about Matt Patricia. I have some question marks about Ohio State's offensive line. I don't care as much about the first time starting quarterback because this is going to be a different situation for Arch Manning as well. And I like Arch Manning a lot, Vince, but I mean, let's be honest about something, guys. There's a big difference between starting against Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State at home as a off the bench replacement for starter, and then starting at Ohio State.
Oh, for sure.
I don't care who they're losing, but I lean towards Texas just because I think Texas has more coming back. I have more certainty in Texas from a coaching standpoint. Ohio State's learning a brand new system on defense again, brand new play caller on offense. I'm not going to sit there. If somebody's like, hey, I'm taking Ohio State, I'm not going to argue with you. Right now, I'm leaning towards Texas just because I think they just have more. They just have more coming back. And they've kind of played in this environment. They had no problem handling the environment at Michigan last year. They played in the playoff. I mean, there's also a little bit of revenge factor for them because they got beat by Ohio State last year. So I'm leaning towards Texas, but I think it's going to be a great game and a close game.
So the next game on the list is Alabama traveling to Seminole Country in Florida State.
Yeah, is that a I thought that was a neutral site game. Maybe it is at Florida State. But I would go Alabama. I think Alabama smacks them.
I'm not on the Florida State bandwagon until I see that they can actually beat someone with a pulse.
It is in Tallahassee. I was wrong. It's in Tallahassee.
Okay. They're going to have to show me something before I start picking Florida State to do anything. I'm sorry. After the Florida State team that I saw last year on numerous occasions and against Notre Dame, it's not going to be a close game.
I think they'll be a lot better than last year, but
I would hope
6-6 is a lot better than last year.
Correct.
That doesn't mean you're good enough to play with Bama.
Correct.
And their team is it's a completely new team. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a tough one, man. That's a tough one.
So the game we've been talking about for the last few minutes, or one of the games, I should say, LSU at Clemson to open up the season.
I got Clemson in that game. I really like this Clemson team. I mean, talk about I need to see something. I need to see Brian Kelly win a season opening game before I'm ready to go there on him. So no, I've got Clemson in that game. I just think Clemson's the better team. I mean, forget the coaching battle. I just think Clemson's the better team.
I do too. And obviously Clemson's getting a lot of preseason love with Cade Klubnik and everything else that they've got going on. I have faith in the Clemson program. And I honestly have faith in Dabo Swinney in a big game, and this is a big game, right? So, and it's at home too. Like that kind of tilts it that direction. And so, yeah, I've got Clemson in this game as well. Final game that Tommy wants us to talk about, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets hit the road to take on the Colorado Buffaloes and all of their retired numbers. Your thoughts on this game, Brian?
I think Georgia Tech is going to smack them pretty good, but this is a game that's going to tell us what each of these teams are going to be.
Yeah.
I really like this Georgia Tech team coming back. I'm not high on Colorado early. I think as Colorado gets it deeper into the year and some of their transfers are more settled in, they'll be okay. I don't think Colorado's just going to fall off the map and go like 3-9 this year. I think they're somewhere in between where they were the last 2 years. I just really like this Georgia Tech team. It's more about that than it is Colorado. And I don't think a lot of the Big 12 teams are really ready to handle a physical football team. And we saw that last year when Colorado played Nebraska. Nebraska's not even like super physical, but they're physical. But the game that really pointed that out was the BYU game. I mean, they just got physically manhandled by BYU in the bowl game. And Georgia Tech's physical, and Colorado's not. And that's really what it comes down to for me.
Yeah.
But if Colorado can win that game or even be competitive, then it's going to tell me that Colorado's going to have a good year. It'll also tell me that maybe Georgia Tech isn't as good as I think. And I want to point out something else. Archer said Texas returns 45% of their production while Ohio State returns 46%. That's a very skewed number, and I really hate when people go to that number because put it to you like this: who returns more production at quarterback, Ohio State or Texas? Texas does. Who returns more production at running back, Ohio State or Texas? Texas does by a lot. It's not even close. It's a lot of the pass game production comes back because you've got Jeremiah Smith and
you got one of the best
Darnell
wide receivers
in
the country. Yeah.
So that's one position where they return more, and they're both going to start transfer tight ends. So that number can be very, very much misguided. And if you're a fan of a team and you're trying to skew something in your direction, you can throw that number out at me. But if you look at the production of players like on across the board, Texas returns more players from their offense and defense that were impact players last year. More. It doesn't mean that the best, but it's more. But again, we're talking about a close game. You're acting like we're sitting there saying like Ohio State's going to get murdered because they have no one coming back. But again, also part of what's coming back is who's got new coordinators this year. Only one of these teams has a new coordinator this year. So like 0% of the defensive production at Ohio State that's returning was in the system that they're going to be playing in now. 0. That factors in as well. So just want to respond to that sentiment as well. But like I said, I think it's going to be a good game. And like I said, if you're taking Ohio State, I'm not going to argue with you. But I think trying to spin it like Ohio State has more coming back than Texas does, I think is a losing argument. That won't be the reason that they win. They're going to win because they're playing at home. They've got really talented players. They execute better. They play better. That could all happen. Even with less returning production, you can still go out and have success. Let's see here.
A. Reagan, Mailbag. There's a real chance that Notre Dame will play 6 top 25 teams at the time that they play in the first 7 games of the season. If they go 7-0, where do you think they'll be ranked going into game number 8?
Number one, I kind of reject the premise of that. Like, look, I'm a Notre Dame fan, and I hope that this is absolutely true. But I'll be shocked if 6 of the 7 teams are ranked. Because now you're telling me that you think that by the time they play, that Miami's going to be ranked. They will. A&M will be ranked. They will. Your next 5 opponents, because he said 6 of the first 7, right?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Are Purdue,
nope,
Arkansas, Boise State, and NC State, and USC.
Yeah.
I don't think
maybe
one of those
teams.
Maybe only one of those teams even begins the season ranked. And so is there a chance? Yes. But when I think real chance, and maybe I'm misreading you, A. Regan, so if I am, just let me know. But like when I see real chance, I'm like, it's likely that this is going to happen. And I don't know that any of those teams are going to necessarily be undefeated. Arkansas could be undefeated. Like, here's the thing. It's like, there's a real chance Arkansas could be ranked if they beat Notre Dame, if they're undefeated when they play Notre Dame. I'm like, well, if they're undefeated when they play Notre Dame, they'll absolutely be ranked. But you're assuming that Arkansas is going to beat Ole Miss and Memphis on the road. And I'm not making that assumption. Like Boise State could be ranked if, there's a good chance they may be ranked. But if they're not ranked to start the season, I don't know if beating USF, Eastern Washington, Air Force, and App State is going to all of a sudden jump them into the top 25. And then NC State, they could maybe be ranked, but I'm like, what's the win that's going to jump them into the top 25? They play ECU, Virginia, Wake, Duke, Virginia Tech, and Campbell. Maybe. I think at best 5 teams are ranked. I think most likely 3 or 4 are ranked to start. But if they go 7-0, where do you think they'll be ranked going into game 8? I mean, if 6 of the 7 teams they beat are ranked, they're at least top 2 to 3.
Right.
But part of it is like, who else? What's the record of other teams? Like,
you know who else is probably going to be undefeated at that point? Penn State, because their record or their schedule's not great.
But to your point though, Vince, is their overall schedule's not great. But if Penn State is like going into that game, if Penn State's undefeated going into game 8, because for game 8 for Notre Dame, that would be November 1st. So if Penn State's undefeated going into the November 1st weekend, they will have beaten, they will have beaten Oregon, and they'll be playing Ohio. They'll have beaten Iowa on the road. If Penn State's ahead of Notre Dame when the season starts,
they will still be ahead of them.
They will still be ahead of them.
Right. That's what I'm
not saying they should,
but they will be. We'll have
or what if Oregon's undefeated? Well, that means they have beaten Oklahoma State, they've beaten Penn State on the road, and they've beaten Indiana. If Texas is undefeated at that point in time, they're probably ahead of Notre Dame also, no matter who Notre Dame beats, because they will have gone on the road and beaten Ohio State. They will have beaten Florida on the road. They'll have beaten Oklahoma on a neutral field.
Right.
So it just depends on, but like I would be shocked if they're not top 3. Because if I think when the AP comes out, I predict Notre Dame's going to be 5th. That's my prediction for the AP. I think they'll have Texas in no order: Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, and
Oregon.
No, probably maybe Georgia.
Okay.
I think it'll be ranked ahead of them. I don't think Oregon will. Well, 2 of those teams play each other in the first game of the year.
True.
And then, they'll pass somebody up because of how they play. So no lower than 4th. But I'd say probably 2nd or 3rd would be my guess. Good question. All right. I'm just trying to get to a few more here, Vince, as we're getting close to wrapping this thing up.
Tommy Guns with the mailbag question. I'm sure it's been stated, but where do you think Charles Jagasaw has his higher ceiling, guard or tackle?
If we're just talking about his level of play, not related to the position, because I think if he's a really good tackle or an elite guard, so like here, his best position is still as a really good left tackle.
Sure.
Because of the positional value.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you're
talking like NFL value and all of that.
Well, not just NFL value, but just the importance to a football team.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
But if you're going to say what position would he take positional value out of the equation, what position would he be the most what position could he be the most consistent and have the most dominant, impactful snaps? I'd say guard.
I would too.
I think he'd be, and this is where I get frustrated with this debate about Jagasaw. Is there some people that think he could be an elite guard, so they talk down his ability as a tackle? And I'm like, no, you don't need, just because he's not as good at tackle as he is a guard, he's still pretty flipping good at tackle.
Correct.
At least he has been in the 2 games we've seen him play. But he can be like special as a guard. I put it, if you were NFL, I'd say like, okay, as a tackle, he's a top 25 NFL draft pick. As a guard, he could be a top 10 NFL draft pick. Like that's kind of, and I'm not saying that, I'm just using that as like a gauge. If like, so he's clearly better there because he's top 10, but he's still pretty flipping good if he's top 25 here. I think he's a 5-star player at both positions. Are you top 5 mean you're number 3 player in the country, or are you top 5 and you're the number 23 player in the country?
Right. When it comes to guard, I can't get the word nasty out of my head. And that is about the ultimate compliment that I can give to an offensive lineman. That's how I see him playing guard. Like, I just think he has the opportunity just to be a nasty guard, both in run blocking and pass pro, both. Like, I don't want to. I mean, the comparisons to Quentin Nelson are going to come because that was the last nasty guard to come out of Notre Dame, and they wear the same number. Like, those comparisons are going to come. I'm not there yet, obviously, because he has yet to put a full season together, but the ceiling is there. Let's see if he can get there and be consistent with it. But
here's a very fair question from Carlos. So it's better for Jagasol's future if he remains a guard. No, I don't agree with that either. Like, I think it's better for Jagasol to be a dominant player. Zach Martin played 4 years at left tackle Notre Dame, became a Hall of Fame right guard.
Yeah.
So for me with Jagasol, it's like he'd be perfectly fine playing tackle. And if anything, being a tackle, like if 27 of the 32 NFL teams view Charles Jagasol as a guard, let's say he moves to left tackle. Let's say something happens to Ashton Craig. He decides he wants to go and run a farm in Indiana. I don't even want to wish an injury on him. He just decides, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm because in my head I'm thinking of like necessary roughness.
He's like the Elmer kid.
No, like, Paul Blake. He's Paul Blake. Right. But without his dad passing away, he decides he wants to go be run a farm. Steve Elmer's a good example, but in my head I got the Paul Blake necessary roughness thing going on. And now we got a center. Okay, Joe Otting maybe. So let's say at that point in time they decide, hey, listen, man, here's what we're gonna do. It's not that Joe Otting's not a heck of a player, but our next best offensive lineman is Kirby Lambert. So we don't want to move Jagas, or you know what I mean? Or no, let's say our next best player is Sullivan Absher, excuse me. And that's our fifth best guy. So we're gonna move, but we don't move him to left tackle. We don't want to move him to center. So we're gonna move Anthony Knapp to center and move Jagasol to left tackle and insert Sullivan Absher right guard. That's our best five. I still think that's great for Jagasol because then if he plays the next 2-3 years at left tackle, now he goes to the NFL draft. People 27 of 32 teams may project him as a guard, but if 5 view him as a tackle, then that might up his value as a draft pick. Now you can look at him at multiple positions as opposed to just not a lot. I don't know many teams that draft a guy who only played guard and then move him to tackle. I don't know how often that's
not usually how that works. Yeah, usually the other way around.
A lot of exactly, and then sometimes you leave a guy at tackle,
right?
But I think just as long as he's able to dominate, that's the best thing for him. But I still think all things being equal, him playing tackle is the best thing for him. But it's like again, it's like 3 to 4, 5. I mean, he could still be a top 10 to 15 NFL draft pick as a guard if he dominates the way he's capable of.
Correct.
And again, I say all the time, I'm not an NFL draft expert. I'm using that as an example to make a point of like the level of dominance.
Right.
All right. Salty gave us a million questions, so let's get down to oh man, Salty, you gotta stop repeating questions, dude. Like literally your first question is the same thing you had on your Bison hold yesterday. Here's a good one, Vince. I'm gonna ask this of you because I've answered this one before. Which 4 players, this is from Salty Virginia Peanuts, which 4 players do you think should be team captains this year? So let's say Notre Dame's going to go 4.
Yep.
Like that doesn't have to be from 2 and 2, just 4 players.
I get it.
Who are your captains?
He asked this question in the other show. But regardless, there's going to be a whole crop of new leaders. You know what I mean? Like this, there is not, to me, and we talked about Jaden Greathouse and it was very clear from the way that Marcus Freeman was kind of talking about Jaden Greathouse that shows leadership qualities. And that was actually very helpful to me because I wasn't sure. You know what I mean? So Jaden Greathouse would be one, and that's based on my conversation today with Marcus Freeman. I was making a case that I think Jeremiah Love has a good chance of being captain. My reasoning behind that is Notre Dame has shown over the last few years that when they've got an elite player who they know is going to be a 3-year player, they generally throw the C on their shirt. Not saying that he doesn't deserve to be a leader on the team and all of those different things, but I think he falls in that category. You know what I mean? And so I would take Jeremiah Love and I would take Jaden Greathouse. it is very odd not to have an offensive lineman, but I don't know which one I would take specifically. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know who the leader of that group is. Is it an Ashton Craig? Because he's probably the oldest one, I believe. Is it
of what?
The offensive line?
He's the same grade as Billy Shrout and Emil Wagner, yeah.
Okay, so there you go. So it's like, I just don't know who would differentiate themselves as a leader. I'm not there every day, so I don't know. But it's weird not having an offensive lineman. That's where I'm at, right? Defensively, I think you've got the potential of a Don Schuler. I think he could be a really, really good leader, especially in that secondary that's full of elite guys. I think he's probably the leader of that group. And I think Drake Bowen has a great chance of potentially being a captain as well. So my final answer would be Greathouse, Love, Bowen, and Schuler. I think those are my 4.
That'd be my 4, but if that'd be my 4.
Okay.
Having said that, you don't have to only have 4 as a team.
Agreed.
I would have Emil Wagner as a captain.
Okay.
I would do a 5th and make him. So like if I had to do 4, I'd go with those 4. We're on the same page. But I would sit there and say, no, we don't have to only go with 4. I'd add Emil Wagner to that.
And you see what I'm saying? Like, it feels weird not to have an offensive lineman.
100% agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think your number of captains should be determined within reason by how many legitimate earned captaincies you have. If you, and that just doesn't mean like you don't have like 9 captains. That's not what I'm talking about. But like, if you have 5 legitimate captains or 3, then okay, then have 6. Meaning like 3 on each side of the ball. If you only have 2, then only go with 2.
Right.
Like, look, man, our quarterback and our middle linebacker are really the only true captains we have. Everybody else is, they're leaders in the room, but they're not. All right, then do that.
And I also don't believe that the quarterback should automatically be a captain either.
I was making a point about like
no, I know. I'm just saying
this guy's he's the clear leader on offense, and he's the clear leader on defense, and nobody else is really that type of get
for sure.
Then maybe only have 2.
Right.
I'm simply saying like it's determined by who are the actual leaders. You don't have an arbitrary number that you set, meaning you don't force 4 just to get to 4, and you don't limit it at 4 just because you've set an arbitrary number.
No, for sure. And there was, when we were talking about it on the show the other night, some people kept saying, CJ Carr. And I think CJ Carr shows leadership abilities, but not like
you know my stance in this, Vince. If he's not have to be a captain.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Like if he does what we think he's going to do, and he's the leadership that as a junior,
when they're in the huddle, he's the freaking leader anyway. 100%. It doesn't matter if they have 10 captains and it's the 10 other guys in the huddle, then guess what? He's still the only one that's talking.
Correct. 100%.
The other thing too is I don't want to put that burden on CJ.
No, he's got other things to worry about.
Let them just go be the quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can have this conversation next year. And I hope that next year we're talking about like 6 or 7 captains because all those guys except for Love come back. But yeah.
But yeah, I would not make CJ Carr captain.
Definitely not make CJ Carr captain. And this has nothing to do with whether he's capable of it. It's just it's a redshirt freshman.
Correct.
I'm with you. Just because you're the starting quarterback doesn't mean you should be a captain.
Because there are coaches that believe that. Like if you're the quarterback, you're a captain. Like
I'm the exact opposite. The quarterback's the leader anyway.
Right.
I don't need you to have a C on your chest to be a leader. I want, especially a guy that young.
Yep. Completely agree.
Yeah. Salty, we will do our final. We'll do our playoff picks later in the season. Here we go. This is a fun one from a new guy in the channel. He's a Miami fan.
Okay,
this is an interesting question.
Welcome, Patel. If there always was a 12-team playoff, would Notre Dame have more or less titles than they do now?
More, definitely more. There might be a year here and there that they would have not won a title in a 4 to 12-team playoff, but there's a lot of years where Notre Dame was number 2, number 3.
89, 93.
Like what I've said about 88 and 89 is I think they split those 2 years.
Okay.
Meaning if there's a 12-team playoff and they had a rematch against Miami, I think Miami wins that rematch on a neutral field. I feel the exact same way in 89, but flipped. If Notre Dame and Miami play in 89 on a neutral field, Notre Dame wins that game. So I still think Notre Dame and Miami split in 88 and 89. It just might have flipped Miami might have won the rematch in 88. Notre Dame was the rematch in 89. I think that Notre Dame wins the title in 92. or 93. So like one of those 2 years, Notre Dame wins a 12-team play. Because that 92 team was, in my opinion, and I've argued this, 89 and 92 were the two most talented teams Lou Holtz ever had. Like that 92 team was ridiculous. You had all the guys from 93 plus Jerome Bettis, plus Reggie Brooks.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know, plus Rick Meyer, plus Tom Carter. Like you had all those dudes in 92. That team had no business losing to Stanford. And if they don't lose to Stanford, they probably do win the national championship in 1992. I mean, like you remember what they did to that really good Texas A&M team in the Cotton Bowl, Vince. I don't know if you remember that game, but they beat Texas A&M. A&M was number 4, and Notre Dame beat, I think they were undefeated. Let me go look at A&M's schedule that year. Yeah, A&M was undefeated that year. They had beaten Stanford, who beat Notre Dame. They beat LSU on the road, beat Missouri. They beat Texas that year on the road, beat TCU, and then they played Notre Dame in the Cotton Bowl. Notre Dame beat them 28-3. Notre Dame tied Michigan that year, early in the year, 17-17. Still pissed about that. Michigan went undefeated in 1992. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
They lose a game in 1992, but they finished 5th in the country. Do you know why? 3 ties.
Ugh.
They went 9-0-3. They tied Notre Dame, Illinois, and Ohio State. And I'm still mad about Notre Dame tying that game. But it was the game against it's the game against Stanford that was the disaster. But that team outside of that game was incredibly good. Like incredibly good. So one of those two teams, like the last 4 games of the year, Notre Dame beat number 9 BC 54-7, number 22 Penn State 17-16. Number 19 USC on the road 31-23, and then they beat number 4 Texas A&M in a bowl game 28-3. That team was nasty.
Right.
And 92 or 93, one of those two would have won it. That's just the 90s. There's other years where era USC or Notre Dame, whoever won that game at the end of the year was going to win a championship. Basically, there was a couple years with era that they could have won it. So yeah, they would absolutely have more. That doesn't mean that they'd have all the ones they have and then more, because there may be some years they won one that they might have got beaten in the playoff. But I just think there's a lot of Notre Dame teams that finished 2nd or 3rd where you could look back and say that was probably the best team in college football. That would have been a great conversation. Like I wish we could have had Lou Samoji on to talk about that, because
he could have gone all
every
day
year, and that would be such an awesome show if we could have done that with Lou. That'd have been great. And this we got a super chat from Michael S. And this is the question that he had related to that. Thanks, Michael.
He says, what is the difference between Michigan's post-champion success in recruiting and Notre Dame's champion appearance? Who was more successful?
I think Notre Dame was, but it's still an unwritten story.
I was going to say, I think you still need to let some things play out.
But so far, Notre Dame's been better, but it's apples to oranges. Michigan had lost their entire coaching staff.
That's also
after they won the title. It's an unfair thing to discuss, really. But so far, I mean, Notre Dame's putting together a phenomenal class so far. They got to close, and that's the thing, is it's going to be determined by how they close. But I mean, Michigan had a pretty good class last year, but I think Notre Dame's on track to have an even better class, and they're doing great in 2027. So that's kind of how it would go.
And that's we kind of talked about that, is that the championship appearance and the success that Notre Dame had in 24, I think you're going to see more of that in the 27 class than you are in the 26 class, just because of the way we talked earlier about how the calendar has just moved up so much. You know, guys in the 26 class they've already made decisions. Like those guys aren't going to be swayed necessarily by some will, but they're not going to be necessarily swayed by the way the season went. That's going to be more in the 27 class and beyond. And especially if you can keep that ball rolling too. But yeah, that's why I think that for this particular question, Michael, and I appreciate it, especially the super chat, that story has yet to be written. Like we don't know you'd have to ask us in like 3 years. You know what I mean? For us to really,
honestly, I feel like you could at least from just a recruiting ranking standpoint,
okay, fair enough.
You could ask me again in December.
Okay.
That immediate hit.
Right.
And I think that but long-term, Vince, to your point, it's like, okay, what's the long-term impact of that? But you could at least get the initial answer in December. Because in December, you're not only going to have those guys signed, but then who do you have committed from 2027?
Yeah.
I love this question, especially with you on the show, because I know your feeling on Indiana.
ICURN with Irish Luck. Why is Indiana getting so much hate when they're ranked below all 3 SEC playoff teams, including a Tennessee team that lost to a 6-6 Arkansas team? It easily, if any, Alabama, Ole Miss, SC don't lose a third.
Two reasons. One's understandable, but I reject. And I reject it like it's the schedule, because they didn't have any quote unquote big wins, which is fair. But my counter to that is we're only talking. They did not have a win as good as Georgia, but they played plenty of Oklahoma and Vanderbilt type of teams, and not only beat them but smashed them. Like, where I don't think Indiana gets enough credit for their 11-1 record is because you're just looking at the 11-1 versus 9-3. It can't be that lazy on either side, because if Georgia would have gone 9-3 last year, I think you could make a case that they still had a better resume than Indiana. Because who they like, the difference is Georgia, lost to Bama, they lost to Ole Miss, like they lost to really good football teams. The problem with Ole Miss and Alabama is they lost to bad football teams or average football teams. Indiana doesn't get a lot of love because they didn't have any big wins, and I get that. What was their big win? Well, they beat Michigan, who beat Bama. So if you want to do the transitive property thing, we have that. But it wasn't just that they won; it was that they just destroyed everybody they played in the regular season outside of Michigan, and they still controlled that game. I mean, they were up 17-3 for most of that, middle part of that game. And I don't think they ever trailed to Michigan. The Michigan might have kicked the field goal first. It was like 17-3 at halftime or something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a game.
It wasn't.
It wasn't.
Michigan having a shot at the end was kind of like Notre Dame having a shot at the end of the Ohio State game.
Fair.
They had a shot, but it was more about you letting them back in the game, and it was going to be tough to win it and that kind of thing. But the big reason why, Vince, is because it's a very shallow analysis of, well, they're Bama, you're Indiana. Like I said at the time, I would have much rather have played Alabama. I think Notre Dame would have beat Alabama worse than they beat Indiana, because they would have been much more focused on Alabama than they were to Indiana.
No, that's fair. Yeah. And
I think Indiana's Bama has a couple better players here and there, but I think Indiana was the better. They were more physical. They were more disciplined. They had a quarterback that I mean, could you imagine Jalen Milroe, as bad as he was last year, trying to throw and as cold as it was that day? Are you kidding me? He couldn't throw in nice weather last year.
So is this question asking why are they ranked where they are in the preseason, or
why are they getting so much hate? Like there's this online, they're still having the debate of Indiana didn't belong in the playoffs and Bama should have got in and all this playoff.
Yes, they absolutely belonged in the playoff.
Right.
I'm not sold on Indiana as a program being able to do that year after year.
Same.
That's where I'm at.
But their 2024 football team was absolutely a top 10 team that belonged in the playoff over Bama.
Yes.
And here's the thing. They say, well, we're just going to pretend strength of schedule doesn't matter. Strength of schedule is the only reason it was even a conversation.
Correct.
Because you have 3 losses and you have 1. Your strength of schedule is the only thing that even made it somewhat debatable.
Right.
But the reality is you didn't get in because you lost to a 6-6 Vanderbilt team.
Correct.
And you lost to a 6-6 Oklahoma team. You look at that when Indiana had similar games last season, and they really had 3. They had 3 comparable games last year. One is Michigan State. Well, Michigan State went 5-7. Yeah, because they lost to Indiana. If Bama would have handled business, Vanderbilt would have gone 5-7, and Oklahoma would have gone 5-7. And they beat them 37-10. They also had a comparable game like that against Nebraska, who actually was better. Nebraska was 6-6. Despite the loss, Nebraska lost to ranked Illinois by a touchdown. They lost at Ohio State by 4. They got beat by UCLA by a touchdown. They got beat by USC by 8. They lost to Iowa by 3. Indiana beat them by 49. 49. 50s, and it wasn't that close. They could have beat them worse. Like, it was a blowout. And so like when they had games like that, Vince, they were just more competitive. They not only won those games, but they dominated those teams. Absolutely. I mean, UCLA is another one. UCLA went 5-7 last year. They played LSU, lost by 17. They played Oregon, lost by 21. Played Penn State, lost by 16. Indiana beat them by 29. So they had 4 weeks in a row. They played Indiana, LSU, Oregon, and Penn State back to back to back to back. And the most convincing victory of that period of time was against Indiana. Indiana not only beat them by more, but Indiana's offense had a higher yards per play allowed than any of those 3 teams. So it's that as well. If they were Michigan with the exact same resume, nobody's questioning whether or not they should be in the playoff. If they had winged helmets and wore maize and blue uniforms and had the same exact resume, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If Bama and Indiana flipped, and Indiana was 9-3 against the same schedule that Bama had, and Bama went 11-1 against the schedule they had, like comparable, like same exact team in the SEC compared to the Big Ten, then we would not be having this conversation. No one would be arguing for Indiana to be in over Alabama at 9-3 with a really hard schedule. Nobody would. It's because they're Indiana. Mm-hmm. That's really what it boils. Same thing with SMU. It's the only reason people are making that argument is because of who it was. Like that's really it.
Yep. No, I completely agree. I thought this was more along the lines of like preseason rankings moving into next year and things like that.
No, it's been going on all week. I've been arguing with people about it.
Oh, the
new playoff thing. It's like and it's not just me, but there's all these national analysts that are still bitching about Indiana and SMU getting in, and that's why the SEC is fighting for what they're fighting for, is because how screwed they got last year and all this other kind of crap. Here's the thought: don't lose to a 5-5 Oklahoma team in November.
Take care of your own business. You don't have to worry about it.
At 10-2, Bama is easily in over SMU and Indiana,
and Boise
should have been.
Boise State's going to get in. They're the top. They were the best big, group of 6 team.
Well,
they're in.
Nobody's bitching about Boise other than that's why we're getting rid of the automatic buys, because Boise and Arizona State got one. But because SMU and Indiana were both at larges,
right?
But it's just like literally at 10-2, it's not a debate. We're all agreeing that Bama should have got in at 10-2.
Correct.
If they beat Oklahoma, it's no debate. They should have been in over Indiana.
Just lose to Oklahoma. They
got crushed
by Oklahoma.
Yeah,
it was just a terrible showing, and you gave yourself no leg to stand on.
Yep,
none. So sorry that.
Agree.
That argument doesn't hold water for me. So you can complain and all you want. Do better.
Agree.
Just be better.
Agree.
Sly Fox 110404. Mailbag, in your humble opinion, and all of my opinions are humble, by the way, who would be your best 5 offensive linemen right now as of today?
By stating that all your opinions are humble, are you not contradicting your premise, your thesis of all your statements being humble? I think the best 5 is right now because Gerby Lambert's injured.
Gerby Lambert's injured.
Is
so off the list. Yeah.
What we expect to start line. It's left to right. Anthony Knapp, Billy Schrouth, Ashton Craig, and
Charles Jagasaw
and Emil Wagner.
Yes.
The only debate that I would have is who's playing where. That's I have thought about. I would, if it was up to me, I would have given Anthony Knapp a ton of time at center this spring.
Me too.
Because I think Anthony Knapp can be a special center. And part of that is I want to get Ashton Craig back, and I don't want to put him right back at center. I want to put him at guard. And then let him battle with the other guys. Because I think that of the 5, I'd argue that Ashton Craig's probably the 5th from a talent standpoint. He's still pretty good, though. He was pretty good last year before he got hurt.
I'm big Ashton Craig fan.
When guys get injured at center and they miss all that time, and he can't really snap a bunch, I want to get some work with Anthony Knapp, and I want to get him off of snapping. And he's gotten his ankle rolled up on a couple times now, and there's a tendency sometimes with a center to not move his feet as much. It's about getting him at guard than him not starting. But it's easier if a guy doesn't play well or gets hurt again. It's easier to replace a guard than it is a center. That's the other reason. But the best 5 is not hard to debate with Gerby Lambert out.
Yeah, agree. Because if Gerby Lambert was healthy, then I think we have a decent debate on who the top 5 might be. But he's not. He's not available. And so I think Notre Dame has it right at the moment. I think they've got the top 5. And, we'll see where the chips fall as far as positionally. I think we know. But, yeah, I agree with who the top 5 are right now for sure. Yeah. Salty Virginia Peanuts with a mailbag question. Will BYU make the playoffs this season?
No, I think BYU is going to be very good, but I think they're going to be just where they were last year, right on the outside looking.
12? Are they
Big 12,
still independent? Okay.
I only have one Big 12 team making it this year. I sent you my
bracket I saw
the other day, Vince.
I did.
They're in a group of three. There's a group of 4 teams I have that are just on the outside, and I have both K-State and BYU on the outside looking in. I could see any one of those teams maybe cracking it as the second Big 12 or winning the Big 12, but I have them right on the outside. Yeah, that's where I'm at on that one. Yeah.
Keys to the car. I kind of like that handle. All right, mailbag. With CFB 26, or College Football 26, coming out and bringing formation subs back, what formation with what players will you have to be a go-to on the game?
I'm a big fan of in 12 personnel going with 2 bigger receivers. Not just for blocking purposes, but also I feel like in those situations I'm going to get a lot more one-on-ones. And I don't know that Notre Dame has a burner outside guy, meaning like that guy that, like, if Will Fuller was on the team, it'd be like Will Fuller out there.
Yeah, right.
Because I can just run, one-on-one, stuff, post corners, deep outs, goes, and things like that. But I like the idea of having like a Malachi Fields and a Micah Gilbert kind of 1-2 punch where, number one, I mean, I can get those guys to football in quick game and they can do some things with it and with their size, but get great blocking. But I can also, if teams want to load the box and play action, I got a shot against some really nice one-on-one combinations, either with play action from a 2x2 set where I got some tight end receiver action. But I really like 12 personnel. I'm a big fan of, especially if I can get the ball on a hash. I love 3x1 with 2 attached. And running some combos from the 2 receivers off play action to the field, depending on how a team's playing you. I think there's a lot of things you can do there. They're creeping in that box. I mean, I'll throw a bubble screen to Micah Gilbert and or let him do something if they're going to get that guy out there. I think that'd be a real fun 1-2 punch. And that's it. I like those formation subs because, like, I don't want Jaden Greathouse to play 75 snaps a game. I want him to be fresh. And that's a great formation to kind of get him some natural breathers as I go to that alignment. So that would be mine.
All right. So I'm going 4 wide receivers, but one of my slots is going to be Jeremiah Love, and I'm going to put Jadarian Price in the backfield.
So you're going to go 20 personnel basically.
And
have Jeremiah out.
Yep. So that's what I would do for fun, just to get him on some routes and get him, maybe matched up with a safety or an outside linebacker or something fun like that. And I'd have some fun with 4 wide receivers or 3 wide receivers / Jeremiah Love. And then, of course, you can always run the ball with Jadarian Price with not much of a problem either. So that's what I would do.
We'll get 3 more, and then we're going to get out of here.
All right. Salty with another one. Mailbag. Should conferences scrap their championship games in the 16-team playoff era? No buys, and will they?
Should they? Yes. Will they? No. They won't because it makes too much money.
Correct. The only way that they're going to do it, Brian, is if the payout is more so that they can cover what they would have made with the conference championship games.
I used to be a fan of the championship games because the championship game meant something.
Sure.
Can't get to the Rose Bowl without winning the championship game. You can't get to the Sugar Bowl without the SEC without winning the championship game. Now it's like, well, you're both going to be in the postseason, so it's turned into a punishment.
Right. Yes.
Like the playing in the SEC title game was a punishment for Texas last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's a punishment for Penn State last year. They decided to go and play an extra game and get beat.
Correct.
And so if they're both going to be in anyway, it's almost like, well, what are you doing it for? And that's why I don't hate the idea of your 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5 to kind of see who that next, give them an extra, like if even without the automatic qualifiers, I still think those playing games make sense because you're giving those teams sort of an extra opportunity to build their resume and go play. I think you should play 12 games and move on. And if you want to make money, then make it a 13-game season for everybody.
Yeah.
If 10 teams a year can play 13 games, why not play everybody? Why not everyone play 13 games? Give everybody a 13th game. And then now you get your extra money and you get your TV money and you get all this and you get that and then you go in the playoff and then no buys.
Right.
16-team playoff, I don't want any buys. I am a believer, and I will say this again, I am a believer in automatic qualifiers for the Power 4 teams. You win the SEC, you win the Big Ten, you win the ACC,
You're saying the champions.
You get in.
Saying the champions.
Then the league can determine how they want to decide the champion. But you get to pick you name your champion, and then we will give that team.
It's like basketball. It's like the basketball tournament. The champions of the league get in, and the rest are you got to figure it out. Like the next best teams get in.
Now, if you want to do automatic qualifiers, okay, fine. Then like you could say, well, the regular season champ gets in, and the tournament champ gets in, like basketball. Well, that's different because you're basically just now saying you're going to put the number 1 and 2 in.
Right.
It
could be the same team.
It's
like,
not right. It could, but like the point is, you can't like if you're 1 and 2 or 1 and 2, they're going to play each other. Whereas in basketball, your 9 seed could end up winning your league tournament. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
I'm with you on the 1 though.
Whether you can determine if it's your regular season champ or if it's your conference championship game, whatever you want to do, you determine it. Because remember back in the day, I said this on the show with Sean last week. Back in the day, remember the ACC in the 90s, the ACC would name their champion, their automatic bid went to their conference tournament champion. Big Ten went to the regular season champion because they didn't have a Big Ten tournament back then. Remember, that didn't come until later in basketball. Yeah, remember, it was a long time. The Big Ten didn't have a tournament. The other leagues were. Big Ten was one of the last teams to have to add a postseason tournament and then have the champion be the automatic qualifier. So that's yeah. All right, we got another question from him that I thought this was an interesting one.
Mailbag from Salty. What does Sherrone Moore have to do this season in terms of wins? And does he need to beat Ohio State to avoid being on the hot seat? We answered this question in our show, so I'll let you go ahead.
I don't think he needs to beat Ohio State to be on the hot seat. What he just has to do is not get blown out by Ohio State. That's the big key. He's already got to win over Ohio State. Like, what he needs to do is minimum 8-4, stay out of trouble, and be competitive against Ohio State. Like, Michigan has a pretty challenging schedule this year. So if you look at their schedule and let's say they go 8-4, let's say they lose to Oklahoma on the road, Nebraska on the road, USC on the road, and Ohio State at home. They go 8-4. They would still beat Wisconsin. They would still beat Washington. They would still beat Michigan State on the road. They'd beat Maryland on the road. That's not a holy cow, you've arrived resume, but it's like, dude, you took some steps. There's a lot going on. I think if at 8-4, the seat is like warm, but it's not hot. Anything worse than 8-4, and he's on the hot seat and should be on the hot seat because that's a good schedule, but it's not like
it's not a great. It's not
talking about with LSU.
Yeah, it's not a crazy schedule. I mean, there's a lot of winnable games.
Depends on what you think. Like, I think Nebraska is going to be really good this year. I think USC is going to be good this year. I think Wisconsin will be better. I think Washington is going to be pretty good this year.
Okay.
So, but again, even when I mean good, I mean top 25. I don't mean like you beat A&M, who I have in the borderline top 10 team.
Right.
That's what I'm referring to. So it's a good schedule, but it's not a gauntlet like we talked about with LSU.
Right.
Who has to play at Clemson, at Bama. You know what I mean? Like, they both play at Oklahoma. So 8-4 keeps the seat warm.
Now, if you go 8-4 and you beat Ohio State,
your seat's not. It's not even warm.
You're fine.
Yeah,
correct.
Because they'll make excuses for the 4 losses.
Oh,
because
100%. He was suspended.
Right, bouncing back. Like, also, these players still recovering. Blah 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 blah. Yeah,
right.
Agree. So we had this one from Salty, and then we had a super chat. We'll end with a super chat because I said 3 more, so I want to get those 3.
Okay, fair.
Yeah,
Salty.
And then I'll do the super chat at the end.
Salty says, would a first round college football playoff bye be on balance or a good thing or a bad thing for Notre Dame?
I think on balance, it's a slightly good thing. I just don't think it's really much of anything at all for Notre Dame as far as like winning a championship. But I think there's a lot of things to make that I would argue that make it a wash. You lose out on the potential to host a game. And because if you're going to get a bye, that means you're highly ranked. You're not traveling anywhere.
Right.
So you'd be hosting. I think it can create a scenario where your draw is a little bit easier as the 5 seed. You know, you're going to be playing a 4 seed is not incredibly hard, but but like sometimes you get like that 6 or 7 seed that's like hot at the end of the year, like USC in 16. Yeah, they were the 8 seed, but that was the hottest team in college football. You know, you run the risk of that a little bit. But I also, you know, the local economy not getting the boost from a playoff game. And then the biggest thing for me, Vince, is the concern that if you play a team in the quarters that lost their conference title game, then you've played a team now that's played twice since your last game. You're going over a month for playing football, and they're now playing 2 games. A lot of people say, well, won't you be fresher? Yeah, but you also be a lot more rusty. And I'd rather be rusty in the first round against the 12 seed than rusty in the second round against the 7 or the 6 or the 5, depending on where you're ranked, or the 8. That's kind of where I look at it. So by and large, I think it's mostly a wash, maybe a slight good thing. I don't think it's like a bad thing. It could be in certain situations a bad thing. And then if the final straw to I say on the whole, it's probably good, is rest.
Yeah.
Jeremiah Love really could have benefited from an extra couple weeks of rest with a bye. Maybe Riley Mills doesn't get hurt if he doesn't have to play in the first round.
That's the thing I keep coming back to, because you know how he's not going to get hurt? Sitting on the couch watching other people play a football game. Like, you know what I mean? And I get it. Like, fair. Somebody did get hurt going down the stairs. We've discussed this in the past. But I will always take the option of not playing a game and advancing over playing a game and potentially not advancing and getting somebody hurt. So, and again, you can't predict injuries like that. I'm not naive to that fact. And revisionist history says, well, if you don't play, Riley Mills doesn't get hurt. I get that too. But he's pretty much guaranteed not to get hurt if you're not playing. So I will take the bye over playing every day. But I also understand a little tune-up game, getting into the playoff. You still got 3 weeks off. You know, this just adds a 4.5 to 5 weeks off if you don't have a game. There's rust involved. I get all of that as well. You would hope that with good leadership, like I think Notre Dame has, they're going to be okay having a bye.
I just want to say this. I have now become sarcastically legitimately offended. Because I never see Connor Patton post in the chat, except when you're on the show. Like, he miraculously is only available for lives when you're on the show with me.
I'm just saying.
I'm Connor, I've noticed a pattern. I'm just saying. You only ever comment when Vince is here. I'm a little offended by it.
Hey, you know.
All right, here's the last question. Super chat from Michael S.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you very much. Why do you think Denbrock was reluctant to unleash Greathouse until the desperate hour in the championship game?
I think Michael, I appreciate the super chat, but I think the entire premise of your question is flawed. I think that and why I say that is it's not revisionist history. I would say go back and listen to the shows we did like every week. We kept talking about you need to throw to Greathouse more. You need to Greathouse more. Why were we saying that? Because we're watching film when we're seeing Greathouse being in good matchups or open or whatever more often.
Right.
And so I just think that it's like what Marcus Freeman said today. Riley eventually learned that when Greathouse is one-on-one, he's open.
Yeah.
Well, we've known that. We've been saying that all year. We kept saying that this kid needs to get the ball more. And so I think there's a lot of reasons for it. Riley didn't have a Jaden Greathouse at Duke. Guys had to be open.
Right.
For him to throw the football.
Yeah, true.
I don't think he was super comfortable in the offense. I don't think that he was super comfortable throwing the ball over the middle of the field in some of the looks that Jaden was in. And so I think there's a lot of different factors for why he wasn't comfortable throwing the ball there. Same reason I don't think the tight ends got the ball in certain situations that we felt they should have got the ball in. And so I think that's a lot of it. And then, I just think part of it too was, I don't think that he unleashed him. The reason that I think Riley went to him more is because he had to. Because they were down 10-0.
Right.
And 10-3. They were down 31-7. Like, I think it was more of that than it was Denbrock just calling plays now. What we thought was going on all year and said so, and show after show after show got proven to be true in those last 2 games, which is you throw that guy to football, he's going to make plays, and he's going to be a weapon for you.
Right.
It was more about that, Michael, to be honest with you. I don't think it had any – I don't think Mike Denbrock – I mean, what was the plays he was getting open on? It was like 2 of the big plays against Penn State were slot fades. The 3rd and 9, back shoulder, the great catch he made, and then the touchdown he made against Penn State. We'd seen them run that play all year, sometimes to him, sometimes other people. The one-handed touchdown against Ohio State was a slot fade. Like, they've been running that play all year. And I mean, he'd thrown to the Great House before. He made a back shoulder slot fade catch against Georgia Tech, for example. I think it was more about Riley's comfort level and not being there, except when he was forced to. And then in that situation, he had nothing to lose, and so you let her rip. And Jaden, and then as far as when Jaden started making some plays against Penn State, then I think he was a little bit more comfortable looking towards them against Ohio State in a similar situation. So that's what I think it boils down to, more so than Coach Denbrock being like, well, let's see what Great House can do,
right?
In game 15,
right?
I don't think that was it at all.
Agreed. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Brian, glad everybody stuck around. This was a fun day, kind of a precursor to summertime, FYI, everybody. So really looking forward to kind of putting on the different hat during the summertime. So really looking forward to that. And thankful we were able to sit down with Marcus Freeman. I hope you guys got a lot out of that as well. Make sure you check out irishbreakdown.com. There's going to be some stories up there, some articles. Obviously, there's going to be some analysis on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. Before you guys take off, make sure you hit that like button. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe button, the notification bell on YouTube, all of the different things, guys. Get over there, give us a 5-star review, do all the things that help us out. We really appreciate it. It costs you nothing to do all of those things, and it really, really helps us out. So we really appreciate it. So again, had a lot of fun. Connor, my man, thank you very much. I know what you really mean. So it's all good. It's all good. But anyway, thank you everybody for hanging out with us today.
Got to stroke Brian's ego sometimes. He gets a little sensitive.
It's all good. It's all good. So thanks everybody for hanging out with us. Really appreciate it. Hope you guys have a wonderful night. So for Brian, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast.